Welcome to Voice of the Pages, the Decameron of Giovanni Boccaccio. Day the 7th. Here beginneth the 7th day of the Decameron, wherein under the governance of Dioneo is discoursed of the tricks which, or for love, or for their own preservation, women have heretofore played their husbands with, or without the latter's cognizance thereof. Every star was already fled from the parts of the east, save only that which we style Lucifer, and which shone yet in the whitening dawn, when the seneschal, arising, betook himself, with a great baggage train, to the Ladies' Valley, there to order everything, according to commandment had of his lord. The king, whom the noise of the packers and of the beasts had awakened, tarried not long after his departure to rise, and being risen, caused arouse all the ladies, and likewise the young men, nor had the rays of the sun yet well broken forth, when they all entered upon the road. Never yet had the nightingales and the other birds seemed to them to sing so blithely as they did that morning, what while, accompanied by their carols, they repaired to the Ladies' Valley, where they were received by many more, which seemed to them to make merry for their coming. There, going round about the place and reviewing it all anew, it appeared to them so much fairer than on the foregoing day, as the season of the day was more sorted to its goodliness. Then, after they had broken their fast with good wine and confections, not to be behindhand with the birds in the matter of song, they fell a-singing, and the valley with them, still echoing those same songs which they did sing, whereto all the birds, as if they would not be outdone, added new and dulcet notes. Presently, the dinner hour being come, and the tables spread hard by the fair lakelet, under the thickset laurels and other goodly trees, they seated themselves there, as it pleased the king, and eating, watched the fish swim in vast shoals about the lake, which gave by times occasion for talk as well as observation. When they had made an end of dining, and the meats and tables were removed, they fell anew to singing more blithely than ever, after which, beds having been spread in various places about the little valley, and all enclosed about by the discreet seneschal with curtains and canopies of French serge, whoso would might with the king's permission go sleep, whilst those who had no mind to sleep might at there will take pleasure of their other wonted pastimes. But after a while, all being now arisen, and the hour come when they should assemble together for story-telling, carpets were, at the king's commandment, spread upon the grass, not far from the place where they had eaten. And all having seated themselves thereon hard by the lake, the king bade Amelia begin, whereupon she blithely proceeded to speak, smiling thus. The first story. Johnny Lotteringy heareth knock at his door by night, and awakeneth his wife, who giveth him to believe that it is a phantom, whereupon they go to exorcise it with a certain orison, and the knocking ceaseth. My lord, it had been very agreeable to me, were such your pleasure, that other than I should have given a beginning to so goodly a matter as is that whereof we are to speak. But since it pleaseth you that I give all the other ladies assurance by my example, I will gladly do it. Moreover, dearest ladies, I will study to tell a thing that may be useful to you in time to come, for that, if you others are as fearful as I, and especially of phantoms, though what manner of thing they may be God knoweth I know not. Nor ever found I any woman who knew it, albeit all are alike adread of them, you may, by noting well my story, learn a holy and goodly orison of great virtue for the conjuring them away, should they come to you. There was once in Florence, in the quarter of San Brancazio, a woolcomber called Johnny Lotteringy, a man more fortunate in his craft than wise in other things, for that, savouring of the simpleton, he was very often made captain of the Lodzingers of Santa Maria Novella, and had the governance of their confraternity, and he many a time had other little offices of the same kind, upon which he much valued himself. This betided him for that, being a man of substance, he gave many a good pittance to the clergy, who, getting of him often, this a pair of hose, that a gown, and another a scapulary, taught him in return store of goodly orisons, and gave him the paternoster in the vulgar tongue, the song of Saint Alexis, the lamentations of Saint Bernard, the canticles of Madame Matilda, and the like trumpery, all which he held very dear and kept very diligently for his soul's health. Now he had a very fair and lovesome lady to wife, by name Mistress Tessa, who was the daughter of Minuccio dalla Cuculia and was exceeding discreet and well-advised. She, knowing her husband's simplicity and being enamored of Federigo di Neri Pegalotti, a brisk and handsome youth, and he of her, took order with a serving maid of hers that he should come speak with her at a very goodly country house, which her husband had at Camerata, where she sojourned all the summer, and whither Johnny came whiles to sup and sleep, returning in the morning to his shop and bytimes to his lodgingers. Federigo, who desired this beyond measure, taking his opportunity, repaired thither on the day appointed him towards vespers, and Johnny not coming thither that evening, supped and lay the night in all ease and delight with the lady, who, being in his arms, taught him that night a good half-dozen of her husband's lauds. Then, neither she nor Federigo purposing that this should be the last, as it had been the first time of their foregathering, they took order together on this wise, so it should not be needful to send the maid for him each time, to wit, that every day, as he came and went to and from a place he had a little farther on, he should keep his eye on a vineyard that adjoined the house, where he would see an ass's skull set up on one of the vine poles, which when as he saw with the muzzle turned towards Florence, he should without fail and in all assurance betake himself to her that evening after dark, and if he found the door shut he should knock softly thrice, and she would open to him, but that, when as he saw the ass's muzzle turned towards Fiesole, he should not come, for that Johnny would be there, and doing on this wise, they forgathered many a time. But once, amongst other times, it chanced that, Federigo being one night to sup with Mistress Tessa, and she having let cook 2 fat capons, Johnny, who was not expected there that night, came thither very late. Whereat the lady was much chagrined, and having supped with her husband on a piece of salt pork, which she had let boil apart, caused the maid wrap the 2 boiled capons in a white napkin and carry them, together with good store of new-laid eggs and a flask of good wine, into a garden she had, whither she could go without passing through the house, and where she was wont to sup whiles with her lover, bidding her lay them at the foot of a peach tree that grew beside a lawn there. But such was her trouble and annoy that she remembered not to bid the maid wait till Federigo should come and tell him that Johnny was there, and that he should take the viands from the garden, wherefore she and Johnny betaking themselves to bed, and the maid likewise. It was not long before Federigo came to the door and knocked softly once. The door was so near to the bedchamber that Johnny heard it incontinent, as also did the lady, but she made a show of being asleep, so her husband might have no suspicion of her. After waiting a little, Federigo knocked a second time, whereupon Johnny, marveling, nudged his wife somewhat, and said, "Tessa, hearest thou what I hear? Meseemeth there is a knocking at our door." The lady, who had heard it much better than he, made a show of awaking and said, "Eh? How sayst thou?" "I say," answered Johnny, "that meseemeth there is a knocking at our door." "Knocking," cried she. "Alack, Johnny mine, knowst thou not what it is? It is a phantom that hath these last few nights given me the greatest fright that ever was, insomuch that, when as I hear it, I put my head under the clothes and dare not bring it out again until it is broad day." Quoth Johnny, "Go to, wife, have no fear if it be so, for I said the Te Lucas and the Intemerata and such other pious orisons before we lay down and crossed the bed from side to side, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, so that we have no need to fear, for that, what power soever it have, it cannot avail to harm us." The lady, fearing lest Federigo should perchance suspect other what and be angered with her, determined at all hazards to arise and let him know that Johnny was there, wherefore quoth she to her husband, "That is all very well, thou sayst thy words, but, for my part, I shall never hold myself safe nor secure, except we exorcise it, since thou art here." "And how is it to be exorcised?" asked he, and she, "I know full well how to exorcise it, for, the other day, when I went to the pardon at Fiesole, a certain anchoress, the very holiest of creatures, Johnny mine, God only can say how holy she is, seeing me thus fearful, taught me a pious and effectual orison, and told me that she had made trial of it several times, ere she became a recluse, and that it had always availed her. God knoweth I should never have dared go alone to make proof of it, but now that thou art here, I would have us go exorcise the phantom." Johnny answered that he would well, and accordingly they both arose and went softly to the door, without which Federigo, who now began to misdoubt him of somewhat, was yet in waiting. When they came thither, the lady said to Johnny, "Do thou spit, whenas I shall bid thee." And he answered, "Good." Then she began the conjuration and said, "Phantom, phantom that goest by night, with tail upright thou camest to us, now get thee gone with tail upright. Be gone into the garden to the foot of the great peach tree, there shalt thou find an anointed twice anointed one and 100 turds of my sitting hen. Set thy mouth to the flagon and get thee gone again, and do thou no hurt to my Johnny nor to me." Then to her husband, "Spit, Johnny," quoth she, and he spat. Federigo, who heard all this from without, and was now quit of jealousy, had, for all his vexation, so great a mind to laugh that he was like to burst, and when Johnny spat, he said under his breath, "Would it were thy teeth." The lady, having thrice conjured the phantom on this wise, returned to bed with her husband, whilst Federigo, who had not supped, looking to sup with her, and had right well apprehended the words of the conjuration, betook himself to the garden, and finding the capons and wine and eggs at the foot of the great peach tree, carried them off to his house, and there supped at his ease. And after, when he next foregathered with the lady, he had a hearty laugh with her anent the conjuration aforesaid. Some say indeed that the lady had actually turned the ass's skull towards Fiesole, but that a husbandman, passing through the vineyard, had given it a blow with a stick and caused it spin round, and it had become turned towards Florence, wherefore Federigo, thinking himself summoned, had come thither, and that the lady had made the conjuration on this wise, "Phantom, phantom, get thee gone in God's name, for it was not I turned the ass's head, but another it was, God put him to shame. And I am here with my Johnny in bed," whereupon he went away and abode without supper or lodging. But a neighbor of mine, a very ancient lady, telleth me that, according to that which she heard, when a child, both the one and the other were true, but that the latter happened, not to Johnny Lotteringi, but to one Johnny di Nello, who abode at Porta San Piero, and was no less exquisite a ninny than the other. Wherefore, dear my ladies, it abideth at your election to take whether of the two orisons most pleaseth you, except you will have both. They have great virtue in such cases, as you have had proof in the story you have heard. Get them, therefore, by heart, and they may yet avail you. The second story. Peronella hideth a lover of hers in a vat, upon her husband's unlooked for return, and hearing from the latter that he hath sold the vat, avoucheth herself to have sold it to one who is presently there within, to see if it be sound, whereupon the gallant, jumping out of the vat, causeth the husband scrape it out for him, and after carry it home to his house. Amelia's story was received with loud laughter, and the conjuration commended of all as goodly and excellent, and this come to an end, the king bade Philostrato follow on, who accordingly began, "Dearest ladies, so many are the tricks that men, and particularly husbands, play you, that if some woman chance whiles to put a cheat upon her husband, you should not only be blithe that this hath happened and take pleasure in coming to know it or hearing it told of any, but should yourselves go telling it everywhere, so men may understand that, if they are knowing, women on their part are no less so. The which cannot be other than useful unto you, for that, when one knoweth that another is on the alert, he setteth himself not over lightly to cozen him. Who, then, can doubt but that which we shall say today concerning this matter, coming to be known of men, may be exceeding effectual in restraining them from cozening you ladies, whenas they find that you likewise know how to cozen, and you will. I purpose, therefore, to tell you the trick which, on the spur of the moment, a young woman, albeit she was of mean condition, played her husband for her own preservation. In Naples no great while agone there was a poor man who took to wife a fair and lovesome damsel called Peronella, and albeit he with his craft, which was that of a mason, and she by spinning, earned but a slender pittance, they ordered their life as best they might. It chanced one day that a young gallant of the neighborhood saw this Peronella, and she pleasing him mightily, he fell in love with her and importuned her one way and another till he became familiar with her, and they took order with each other on this wise, so they might be together. To wit, seeing that her husband arose every morning betimes to go to work or to find work, they agreed that the young man should be whereas he might see him go out, and that, as soon as he was gone, the street where she abode, which was called Avorio, being very solitary, he should come to her house. On this wise they did many times, but one morning, the good man having gone out and Janello Strignario, for so was the lover named, having entered the house and being with Peronella, it chanced that, after a while, the husband returned home. For, though thou hast made me poor, at least thou hast comforted me with a good and honest damsel to wife. See how she locked the door within as soon as I was gone out, so none might enter to do her any annoy. Peronella, knowing her husband by his way of knocking, said to her lover, Alack, Janello mine, I am a dead woman. For here is my husband, whom God confound, come back, and I know not what this meaneth, for never yet came he back hither at this hour, belike he saw thee when as thou enteredst here. But, for the love of God, however the case may be, get thee into yonder vat, whilst I go open to him, and we shall see what is the meaning of his returning home so early this morning. Accordingly, Janello betook himself in all haste into the vat, whilst Peronella, going to the door, opened to her husband and said to him, with an angry air, What is to do now, that thou returnest home so soon this morning? Meseemeth thou hast a mind to do naught today, that I see thee come back, tools in hand, and if thou do thus, on what are we to live? Whence shall we get bread? Thinkest thou I will suffer thee pawn my gown and my other poor clothes? I, who do nothing but spin day and night, till the flesh is come apart from my nails, so I may at the least have so much oil as will keep our lamp burning. Husband, husband, there is not a neighbor's wife of ours, but marvelleth thereat, and mocketh of me for the pains I give myself, and all that I endure, and thou returnest home to me, with thy hands a dangle, when as thou shouldst be at work. So saying, she fell a weeping and went on to say, Alack, woe is me, unhappy woman that I am! In what an ill hour was I born, at what an ill moment did I come hither? I who might have had a young man of such worth, and would none of him, so I might come to this fellow here, who taketh no thought to her whom he hath brought home. Other women give themselves a good time with their lovers, for there is none I know but hath 2 and some 3, and they enjoy themselves and show their husbands the moon for the sun. But I, wretch that I am, because I am good and occupy myself not with such toys, I suffer ill and ill hap. I know not why I do not take me a lover, as do other women. Understand well, husband mine, that had I a mind to do ill, I could soon enough find the wherewithal, for there be store of brisk young fellows who love me and wish me well and have sent to me, proffering money galore or dresses and jewels, at my choice. But my heart would never suffer me to do it, for that I was no mother's daughter of that ilk, and here thou comest home to me, when as thou shouldst be at work. Good lack, wife, answered the husband, fret not thyself, for God's sake. Thou shouldst be assured that I know what manner of woman thou art, and indeed this morning I have in part had proof thereof. It is true that I went out to go to work, but it seemeth thou knowest not, as I myself knew not, that this is the feast day of San Gaelwan, and there is no work doing. That is why I am come back at this hour. But none the less I have provided and found a means how we shall have bread for more than a month, for I have sold yonder man thou sayest here with me the vat which, as thou knowest, hath this long while cumbered the house, and he is to give me 5 lily florins for it. Quoth Peronella, so much the more cause have I to complain. Thou, who art a man and goest about and should be versed in the things of the world, thou hast sold a vat for 5 florins, whilst I, a poor silly woman who hath scarce ever been without the door, seeing the hindrance it gave us in the house, have sold it for 7 to an honest man, who entered it but now, as thou camest back, to see if it were sound. When the husband heard this, he was more than satisfied, and said to him who had come for the vat, Good man, be gone in peace. For thou hearest that my wife hath sold the vat for 7 florins, whereas thou wast to give me but 5 for it. Good, replied the other, and went his way. Whereupon quoth Petronella to her husband, Since thou art here, come up and settle with him thyself. Janello, who abode with his ears pricked up to hear if it behoved him fear or be on his guard against aught, hearing his mistress's words, straightway scrambled out of the vat and cried out, as if he had heard nothing of the husband's return, Where art thou, good wife? Whereupon the goodman, coming up, answered, Here am I. What wouldst thou have? Who art thou? Asked Janello. I want the woman with whom I made the bargain for this vat. Quoth the other, You may deal with me in all assurance, for I am her husband. Then said Janello, The vat appeareth to me sound enough, but meseemeth you have kept dregs or the like therein, for it is all overcrusted with I know not what that is so hard and dry that I cannot remove aught thereof with my nails, wherefore I will not take it, except I first see it clean. Nay, answered Petronella, the bargain shall not fall through for that. My husband will clean it all out. I, rejoined the latter, and laying down his tools, put off his coat. Then, calling for a light and a scraper, he entered the vat, and fell to scraping. Petronella, as if she had a mind to see what he did, thrust her head and one of her arms, shoulder and all, in at the mouth of the vat, which was not over big, and fell to saying, Scrape here, and there also, and see, here is a little left. Whilst she was thus engaged in directing her husband and showing him where to scrape, Janello, who had scarce yet that morning done his full desire, when they were interrupted by the mason's coming, seeing that he could not as he would, bethought himself to accomplish it as he might, wherefore, boarding her as she held the mouth of the vat all closed up, on such wise as in the ample plains the unbridled stallions, afire with love, assail the maras of Parthia, he satisfied his juvenile ardor. The which enterprise was brought to perfection well nigh at the same moment as the scraping of the vat, whereupon he dismounted, and Petronella withdrawing her head from the mouth of the vat, the husband came forth thereof. Then said she to her gallant, Take this light, good man, and look if it be clean to thy mind. Janello looked in and said that it was well, and that he was satisfied, and giving the husband 7 florins, caused carry the vat to his own house. The third story. For Rinaldo leath with his gossip, and being found of her husband closeted with her in her chamber, they give him to believe that he was in act to conjure worms from his godson. Philostrato had not known to speak so obscurely of the maras of Parthia, but that the roguish ladies laughed thereat, making believe to laugh at other what. But when the king saw that his story was ended, he bade Elisa tell, who accordingly, with obedient readiness, began, Charming ladies, Emilia's conjuration of the phantom hath brought to my memory the story of another conjuration, which latter, though it be not so goodly as hers, nevertheless, for that none other bearing upon our subject occurreth to me at this present, I will proceed to relate. You must know that there was once in Siena a very agreeable young man and of a worshipful family, by name Rinaldo, who was passionately enamored of a very beautiful lady, a neighbor of his and the wife of a rich man, and flattered himself that, could he but find means to speak with her unsuspected, he might avail to have of her all that he should desire. Seeing none other way, and the lady being great with child, he bethought himself to become her gossip, and accordingly, clapping up an acquaintance with her husband, he offered him, on such wise as appeared to him most seemly, to be godfather to his child. His offer was accepted, and he being now become Madame Agnes's gossip, and having a somewhat more colorable excuse for speaking with her, he took courage and gave her in so many words to know that of his intent, which she had indeed long before gathered from his looks. But little did this profit him, although the lady was nothing displeased to have heard him. Not long after, Whatever might have been the reason, it came to pass that Rinaldo turned friar, and whether or not he found the pastorage to his liking, he persevered in that way of life, and albeit, in the days of his becoming a monk, he had for a while laid on one side the love he bore his gossip, together with sundry other vanities of his, yet, in process of time, without quitting the monk's habit, he resumed them and began to delight in making a show and wearing fine stuffs and being dainty and elegant in all his fashions, and making canzonets and sonnets and ballads, and in singing and all manner other things of the like sort. But what say I of our Fra Rinaldo, of whom we speak? What monks are there that do not thus? Alack, shame that they are of the corrupt world. They blush not to appear fat and ruddy in the face, dainty in their garb, and in all that pertaineth unto them, and strut along, not like doves, but like very turkey-cocks, with crest erect and breast puffed out. And what is worse, to say nothing of having their cells full of gallipots crammed with electuaries and unguents, of boxes full of various confections, of phials and flagons of distilled waters and oils, of pitchers brimming with malmsey, and cypress and other wines of price, insomuch that they seem to the beholder not friars' cells, but rather apothecaries' or perfumers' shops. They think no shame that folk should know them to be gouty, conceiving that others see not nor know that strict fasting, coarse viands in spare and sober living make men lean and slender, and for the most part sound of body, and that if indeed some sicken thereof, at least they sicken not of the gout, whereto it is used to give, for medicine, chastity, and everything else that pertaineth to the natural way of living of an honest friar. Yet they persuade themselves that others know not that, let alone the scant and sober living, long vigils, praying and discipline should make men pale and mortified, and that neither Saint Dominic nor Saint Francis, far from having 4 gowns for one, clad themselves in cloth dyed in grain nor in other fine stuffs, but in garments of coarse wool and undyed, to keep out the cold and not to make a show. For which things, as well as for the souls of the simpletons who nourish them, there is need that God provide. Fra Rinaldo, then, having returned to his former appetites, began to pay frequent visits to his gossip, and waxing in assurance, proceeded to solicit her with more than his former instancy to that which he desired of her. The good lady, seeing herself hard-pressed, and Fra Rinaldo seeming to her belike goodlier than she had thought him aforetime, being one day sore importuned of him, had recourse to that argument which all women use who have a mind to yield that which is asked of them, and said, How now, Fra Rinaldo? Do monks such things? Madam, answered he, whenas I shall have this gown off my back, and I can put it off mighty easily, I shall appear to you a man fashioned like other men, and not a monk. The lady pulled a demure face and said, Alack, wretched me! You are my gossip. How can I do this? It were sadly ill, and I have heard many a time that it is a very great sin, but, certes, were it not for this, I would do that which you wish. Quoth Fra Rinaldo, You are a simpleton, if you forbear for this. I do not say that it is not a sin, but God pardoneth greater than this to whoso repenteth. But tell me, who is more akin to your child, I who held him at baptism, or your husband who begot him? My husband is more akin to him, answered the lady, whereupon you say sooth, rejoined the friar. And doth not your husband lie with you? I doth he, replied she. Then, said Fra Rinaldo, I, who am less akin to your child than is your husband, may lie with you even as doth he. The lady, who knew no logic and needed little persuasion, either believed or made a show of believing that the friar spoke the truth, and answered, Who might avail to answer your learned words? And after, notwithstanding the gossipship, she resigned herself to do his pleasure, nor did they content themselves with one bout, but forgathered many and many a time, having the more commodity thereof under cover of the gossipship, for that there was less suspicion. But once, amongst other times, it befell that Fra Rinaldo, coming to the lady's house and finding none with her but a little maid of hers, who was very pretty and agreeable, dispatched his comrade with the latter to the pigeon loft, to teach her her paternoster, and entered with the lady, who had her child in her hand, into her bedchamber, where they locked themselves in and fell to taking their pleasure upon a daybed that was there. As they were thus engaged, it chanced that the husband came home, and making for the bedchamber door, unperceived of any, knocked and called to the lady, who, hearing this, said to the friar, I am a dead woman, for here is my husband. And now he will certainly perceive what is the reason of our familiarity. Now Rinaldo was stripped to his waistcoat, to wit, he had put off his gown and his scapulary, and hearing this, answered, You say sooth, were I but dressed, there might be some means, but if you open to him, and he find me thus, there can be no excuse for us. The lady, seized with a sudden idea, said, Harkye, dress yourself, and when you are dressed, take your godchild in your arms and hearken well to that which I shall say to him, so your words may after accord with mine, and leave me do. Then, to the good man, who had not yet left knocking, I come to thee, quoth she, and rising, opened the chamber door, and said, with a good countenance, Husband mine, I must tell thee that for Rinaldo, our gossip, is come hither, and it was God sent him to us. For, certes, but for his coming, we should today have lost our child. The good simple man, hearing this, was like to swoon, and said, How so? O husband mine, answered Agnesa, there took him but now of a sudden a fainting fit, that methought he was dead, and I knew not what to do or say. But just then Fra Rinaldo our gossip came in, and taking him in his arms, said, Gossip, these be worms he hath in his body, the which draw near to his heart, and would infallibly kill him. But have no fear, for I will conjure them and make them all die, and ere I go hence, you shall see the child whole again as ever you saw him. And for that we had need of thee to repeat certain orisons, and that the maid could not find thee, he caused his comrades say them in the highest room of our house, whilst he and I came hither and locked ourselves in, so none should hinder us, for that none other than the child's mother might be present at such an office. Indeed, he hath the child yet in his arms, and methinketh he waiteth, but for his comrade to have made an end of saying the orisons, and it will be done, for that the boy is already altogether restored to himself. The good simple man, believing all this, was so straitened with concern for his child that it never entered his mind to suspect the cheat put upon him by his wife. But, heaving a great sigh, he said, I will go see him. Nay, answered she, thou wouldst mar that which hath been done. Wait, I will go see, and thou mayst come in and call thee. Meanwhile, for Rinaldo, who had heard everything and had dressed himself at his leisure, took the child in his arms and called out, as soon as he had ordered matters to his mind, saying, Harkye, gossip, hear I not my gossip your husband there? Ay, sir, answered the simpleton. Whereupon, then, said the other, Come hither. The cuckold went to him, and for Rinaldo said to him, Take your son by the grace of God whole and well, whereas I deemed, but now you would not see him alive at vespers, and look you let make a waxen image of his bigness, and set it up, to the praise and glory of God, before the statue of our Lord St. Ambrose, through whose intercession he hath vouchsafed to restore him unto you. The child, seeing his father, ran to him and caressed him, as little children used to do, whilst the latter, taking him, weeping in his arms no otherwise than as he had brought him forth of the grave, fell to kissing him and returning thanks to his gossip for that he had made him whole. Meanwhile, Fra Rinaldo's comrade, who had by this taught the serving wench not one, but maybe more than 4 paternosters, and had given her a little purse of white thread, which he had from a nun, and made her his devotee, hearing the cuckold call at his wife's chamber door, had softly betaken himself to a place whence he could, himself unseen, both see and hear what should betide, and presently, seeing that all had passed off well, came down, and entering the chamber, said, Fra Rinaldo, I have dispatched all 4 of the orisons which you bade me say. Brother mine, answered the friar, thou hast a good wind, and hast done well. I, for my part, had said but 2 thereof, when my gossip came, but God the Lord, what with thy pains and mine, hath shown us such favour that the child is healed. Therewithal the cuckold let bring good wines and confections, and entertained his gossip and the latter's comrade with that whereof they had more need than of aught else. Then, attending them to the door, he commended them to God, and letting make the waxen image without delay, he sent to hang it up with the others before the statue of St. Ambrose, but not that of Milan. The fourth story. Tefano one night shutteth his wife out of doors, who, availing not to re-enter by dint of entreaties, feigneth to cast herself into a well, and casteth therein a great stone. Tefano cometh forth of the house, and runneth thither, whereupon she slippeth in, and locking him out, bawleth reproaches at him from the window. The king no sooner perceived Elise's story to be ended than, turning without delay to Loretta, he signified to her his pleasure that she should tell, whereupon she, without hesitation, began thus: O love, how great and how various is thy might! How many thy resources and thy devices! What philosopher, what craftsman could ever have availed or might avail to teach those shifts, those feints, those subterfuges which thou on the spur of the moment suggestest to whoso ensweth in thy traces? Certes, all others' teaching is halting compared with thine, as may very well have been apprehended by the devices which have already been set forth, and to which, lovesome ladies, I will add one practiced by a woman of a simple wit enough, and such as I know none but love could have taught her. There was once, then, in Arezzo, a rich man called Tefano, and he was given to wife a very fair lady, by name Madame Ghita, of whom, without knowing why, he quickly waxed jealous. The lady, becoming aware of this, was despite thereat, and questioned him once and again of the reason of his jealousy, but he was able to assign her none, save such as were general and not. Wherefore it occurred to her mind to cause him die of the disease, whereof he stood without reason in fear. Accordingly, perceiving that a young man, who was much to her taste, sighed for her, she proceeded discreetly to come to an understanding with him, and things being so far advanced between them that there lacked but with deeds to give effect to words, she cast about for a means of bringing this also to pass, wherefore, having already remarked, amongst her husband's other ill-usances, that he delighted in drinking, she began not only to commend this to him, but would often artfully incite him thereto. This became so much his wont that, well nigh whensoever it pleased her, she led him to drink even to intoxication, and putting him to bed when as she saw him well drunken, she a first time forgathered with her lover, with whom many a time thereafter she continued to do so in all security. Indeed, she grew to put such trust in her husband's drunkenness that not only did she make bold to bring her gallant into the house, but went whiles to pass a great part of the night with him in his own house, which was not very far distant. The enamoured lady continuing on this wise, it befell that the wretched husband came to perceive that she, whilst encouraging him to drink, nathless herself drank never, wherefore suspicion took him that it might be as in truth it was, to wit, that she made him drunken, so she might after do her pleasure what while he slept, and wishing to make proof of this, and it were so, he one evening, not having drunken that day, feigned himself, both in words and fashions, the drunkenest man that was. I. The lady, believing this and judging that he needed no more drink, put him to bed in all haste, and this done, betook herself, as she was used to do whiles, to the house of her lover, where she abode till midnight. As for Tefano, no sooner did he know the lady to have left the house than he straightway arose, and going to the doors, locked them from within, after which he posted himself at the window, so he might see her return and show her that he had gotten wind of her fashions, and there he abode till such time as she came back. The lady, returning home and finding herself locked out, was beyond measure woeful, and began to essay and she might avail to open the door by force, which, after Tefano had a while suffered, wife, quoth he, thou weariest thyself in vain, for thou canst nowise come in here again. Go, get thee back whereas thou hast been till now, and be assured that thou shalt never return thither till such time as I shall have done thee, in respect of this affair, such honour as beseemeth thee in the presence of thy kinsfolk and of the neighbours. The lady fell to beseeching him for the love of God that it would please him open to her, for that she came not whence he supposed, but from keeping vigil with a she-neighbour of hers, for that the nights were long, and she could not sleep them all out nor watch at home alone. However, prayers profited her not, for that her brood of a husband was minded to have all the Artines know their shame, whereas none as yet knew it. Wherefore, seeing that prayers availed her not, she had recourse to threats and said, "An thou open not to me, I will make thee the wofullest man alive." "And what canst thou do to me?" asked Tufano, and Mistress Tessa, whose wits love had already whetted with his counsels, replied, "Rather than brook the shame which thou wouldst wrongfully cause me suffer, I will cast myself into this well that is here nigh, where when I am found dead, there is none will believe otherwise than that thou, for very drunkenness, hast cast me therein, wherefore it will behove thee flee and lose all thou hast and abide in banishment or have thy head cut off for my murderer, as thou wilt in truth have been." Tufano was nowise moved by these words from his besotted intent, wherefore quoth she to him, "Harkee now, I can no longer brook this thy fashery, God pardon it thee. Look thou cause lay up this distaff of mine, that I leave here." So saying, the night being so dark that one might scarce see other by the way, she went up to the well, and taking a great stone that lay thereby, cried out, "God pardon me," and let it drop into the water. The stone, striking the water, made a very great noise, which when Tufano heard, he verily believed that she had cast herself in, wherefore, snatching up the bucket and the rope, he rushed out of the house and ran to the well to succor her. The lady, who had hidden herself near the door, no sooner saw him run to the well than she slipped into the house and locked herself in. Then, getting her to the window, "You should water your wine, when as you drink it," quoth she, "and not after and by night." Tufano, hearing this, knew himself to have been fooled and returned to the door, but could get no admission and proceeded to bid her open to him, but she left speaking softly, as she had done till then, and began, well nigh at a scream, to say, "By Christ his cross, tiresome sot that thou art, thou shalt not enter here tonight. I cannot brook these thy fashions any longer. Needs must I let every one see what manner of man thou art, and at what hour thou comest home o' nights." Tufano, on his side, flying into a rage, began to rail at her and bawl, whereupon the neighbors, hearing the clamor, arose, both men and women, and, coming to the windows, asked what was to do. The lady answered, weeping, "It is this wretch of a man, who still returneth to me of an evening, drunken, or falleth asleep about the taverns, and after cometh home at this hour, the which I have long suffered, but, it availing me not, and I being unable to put up with it longer, I have bethought me to shame him therefore by locking him out of doors, to see, and he will mend himself thereof." Tufano, on the other hand, told them, like an ass as he was, how the case stood and threatened her sore, but she said to the neighbors, "Look you now what a man he is. What would you say, were I in the street, as he is, and he in the house, as am I? By God his faith, I doubt me you would believe he said sooth. By this you may judge of his wits. He saith I have done just what methinketh he hath himself done. He thought to fear me by casting I know not what into the well, but would God he had cast himself there in good sooth and drowned himself, so he might have well watered the wine which he hath drunken to excess." The neighbors, both men and women, all fell to blaming Tufano, holding him at fault, and chid him for that which he said against the lady, and in a short time the report was so noised abroad from neighbor to neighbor that it reached the ears of the lady's kinsfolk, who came thither and, hearing the thing from one and another of the neighbors, took Tufano and gave him such a drubbing that they broke every bone in his body. Then, entering the house, they took the lady's gear and carried her off home with them, threatening Tufano with worse. The latter, finding himself in ill case and seeing that his jealousy had brought him to a sorry pass, for that he still loved his wife heartily, procured certain friends to intercede for him, and so wrought that he made his peace with the lady and had her home again with him, promising her that he would never be jealous again. Moreover, he gave her leave to do her every pleasure, provided she wrought so discreetly that he should know nothing thereof, and on this wise, like a crack-brained churl as he was, he made peace after suffering damage. So long live love and death to war and all its company. The fifth story. A jealous husband, in the guise of a priest, confesseth his wife, who giveth him to believe that she loveth a priest, who cometh to her every night, and whilst the husband secretly keepeth watch at the door for the latter, the lady bringeth in a lover of hers by the roof, and lieth with him. Loretta having made an end of her story, and all having commended the lady for that she had done aright, and even as befitted her wretch of a husband, the king, to lose no time, turned to Fiammetta and courteously imposed on her the burden of the story-telling. Whereupon she began thus: Most noble ladies, the foregoing story moveth me to tell you, on like wise, of a jealous husband, accounting, as I do, all that their wives do unto such, particularly when as they are jealous without cause, to be well done, and holding that, if the makers of the laws had considered everything, they should have appointed none other penalty unto women who offend in this than that which they appoint unto whoso offendeth against other in self-defense. For that jealous men are plotters against the lives of young women, and most diligent procurers of their deaths. Wives abide all the week mute up at home, occupying themselves with domestic offices and the occasions of their families and households, and after they would fain, like everyone else, have some solace and some rest on holidays, and be at leisure to take some diversion, even as do the tillers of the fields, the artisans of the towns, and the administrators of the laws, according to the example of God himself, who rested from all his labors the seventh day, and to the intent of the laws, both human and divine, which, looking to the honor of God and the common weal of all, have distinguished working days from those of repose. But to this jealous men will on no wise consent. Nay, those days which are gladsome for all other women they make wretcheder and more doleful than the others to their wives, keeping them yet closelier straitened and confined. And what a misery and a languishment this is for the poor creatures, those only know who have proved it. Wherefore, to conclude, I say that what a woman doth to a husband who is jealous without cause should certes not be condemned, but rather commended. There was then in Erimino a merchant, very rich both in lands and moneys, who, having to wife a very fair lady, became beyond measure jealous of her, nor had he other cause for this save that, as he loved her exceedingly and held her very fair, and saw that she studied with all her might to please him, even so he imagined that every man loved her, and that she appeared fair to all, and eke that she studied to please others as she did himself, which was the reasoning of a man of naught and one of little sense. Being grown thus jealous, he kept such strict watch over her and held her in such constraint that belike many there be of those who are condemned to capital punishment who are less straitly guarded of their jailers, for, far from being at liberty to go to weddings or entertainments or to church, or indeed anywise to set foot without the house, she dared not even stand at the window nor look abroad on any occasion. Wherefore her life was most wretched, and she brooked this annoy with the more impatience as she felt herself the less to blame. Accordingly, seeing herself unjustly suspected of her husband, she determined, for her own solacement, to find a means, and she but might, of doing on such wise that he should have reason for his ill usage of her, and for that she might not station herself at the window, and so had no opportunity of showing herself favorable to the suit of anyone who might take note of her, as he passed along her street, and pay his court to her. Knowing that in the adjoining house there was a certain young man both handsome and agreeable, she bethought herself to look if there were any hole in the wall that parted the two houses, and therethrough to spy once, and again till such time as she should see the youth aforesaid, and find an occasion of speaking with him, and bestowing on him her love, so he would accept thereof, purposing, if a means could be found, to foregather with him bytimes, and on this wise while away her sorry life till such time as the demon of jealousy should take leave of her husband. Accordingly, she went spying about the walls of the house, now in one part and now in another, whenas her husband was abroad, and happened at last upon a very privy place where the wall was somewhat opened by a fissure, and looking therethrough, albeit she could ill discover what was on the other side, algates she perceived that the opening gave upon a bedchamber there, and said in herself, should this be the chamber of Filippo, to wit, the youth her neighbor, I were half sped. Then, causing secretly inquire of this by a maid of hers, who had pity upon her, she found that the young man did indeed sleep in that chamber all alone, wherefore, by dint of often visiting the crevice and dropping pebbles and such small matters, whenas she perceived him to be there, she wrought on such wise that he came to the opening, to see what was to do, whereupon she called to him softly. He, knowing her voice, answered her, and she, profiting by the occasion, discovered to him in brief all her mind, whereat the youth was mightily content and made shift to enlarge the whole from his side on such wise that none could perceive it. And therethrough they many a time bespoke one another and touched hands, but could go no farther, for the jealous vigilance of the husband. After a while, the feast of the Nativity drawing near, the lady told her husband that, and it pleased him, she would fain go to church on Christmas morning and confess, and take the sacrament, as other Christians did. Quoth he, And what sin hast thou committed that thou wouldst confess? How? Answered the lady. Thinkest thou that I am a saint because thou keepest me mute up? Thou must know well enough that I commit sins like all others that live in this world, but I will not tell them to thee, for that thou art not a priest. The jealous wretch took suspicion at these words and determined to seek to know what sins she had committed, wherefore, having bethought himself of a means whereby he might gain his end, he answered that he was content, but that he would have her go to no other church than their parish chapel, and that thither she must go betimes in the morning and confess herself either to their chaplain or to such priest as the latter should appoint her, and to none other, and presently return home. Her seemed she half apprehended his meaning, but without saying otherwhat, she answered that she would do as he said. Accordingly, Christmas Day come, the lady arose at daybreak and, attiring herself, repaired to the church appointed her of her husband, who, on his part, betook himself to the same place and reached it before her. Having already taken order with the chaplain of that which he had a mind to do, he hastily donned one of the latter's gowns, with a great flapped cowl, such as we see priests wear, and, drawing the hood a little over his face, seated himself in the choir. The lady, entering the chapel, inquired for the chaplain, who came, and hearing from her that she would fain confess, said that he could not hear her, but would send her one of his brethren. Accordingly, going away, he sent her the jealous man, in an ill hour for the latter, who came up with a very grave air, and albeit the day was not over bright, and he had drawn the cowl far over his eyes, knew not so well to disguise himself, but he was readily recognized by the lady, who, seeing this, said in herself, Praised be God. From a jealous man he is turned priest, but no matter, I will e'en give him what he goeth seeking. Accordingly, feigning not to know him, she seated herself at his feet. My Lord Jealousy had put some pebbles in his mouth, to impede his speech somewhat, so his wife might not know him by his voice, him seeming he was in every other particular so thoroughly disguised that he was nowise fearful of being recognized by her. To come to the confession, the lady told him, amongst other things, having first declared herself to be married, that she was enamored of a priest, who came every night to lie with her. When the jealous man heard this, him seemed he had gotten a knife thrust in the heart, and had not desire constrained him to know more, he had abandoned the confession and gone away. Standing fast, then he asked the lady, How? Doth not your husband lie with you? I doth he, sir, replied she. How, then, asked the jealous man, can the priest also lie with you? Sir, answered she, by what art he doth it I know not, but there is not a door in the house so fast locked but it openeth so soon as he toucheth it, and he telleth me that, whenas he cometh to the door of my chamber, before opening it, he pronounceth certain words, by virtue whereof my husband incontinent falleth asleep, and so soon as he perceiveth him to be fast, he openeth the door and cometh in and leeth with me, and this never faileth. Quoth the mock priest, Madam, this is ill done, and it behoveth you altogether to refrain therefrom. Sir, answered the lady, methinketh I could never do that, for that I love him too well. Then, Said the other, I cannot shrive you. Quoth she, I am grieved for that, but I came not hither to tell you lies, and I thought I could do it, I would tell you so. In truth, madam, replied the husband, I am concerned for you, for that I see you lose your soul at this game, but, to do you service, I will well to take the pains of putting up my special orisons to God in your name, the which maybe shall profit you, and I will send you by times a little clerk of mine, to whom you shall say if they have profited you or not, and if they have profited you, we will proceed farther. Sir, answered the lady, whatever you do, send none to me at home, for, should my husband come to know of it, he is so terribly jealous that nothing in the world would get it out of his head that your messenger came hither for naught but ill. And I should have no peace with him this year to come. Quoth the other, Madam, have no fear of that, for I will certainly contrive it on such wise that you shall never hear a word of the matter from him. Then said she, So, but you can engage to do that, I am content. Then, having made her confession and gotten her penance, she rose to her feet and went off to hear mass, whilst the jealous man, ill luck go with him, withdrew, bursting with rage, to put off his priest's habit, and returned home, impatient to find a means of surprising the priest with his wife, so he might play the one and the other an ill turn. Presently the lady came back from church and saw plainly enough from her husband's looks that she had given him an ill Christmas, albeit he studied, as most he might, to conceal that which he had done and what him seemed he had learned. Then, being inwardly resolved to lie and wait near the street door that night, and watch for the priest's coming, he said to the lady, Needs must I sup and lie abroad tonight, wherefore look thou lock the street door fast, as well as that of the midstair and that of thy chamber, and get thee to bed, whenas it seemeth good to thee. The lady answered, It is well, and, betaking herself, as soon as she had leisure, to the hole in the wall, she made the wonted signal, which when Filippo heard, he came to her forthright. She told him how she had done that morning and what her husband had said to her after dinner, and added, I am certain he will not leave the house, but will set himself to watch the door, wherefore do thou find means to come hither to me tonight by the roof, so we may lie together. The young man was mightily rejoiced at this, and answered, Madam, leave me do. Accordingly, the night come, the jealous man took his arms and hid himself by stealth in a room on the ground floor, whilst the lady, when as it seemed to her time, having caused lock all the doors, and in particular that of the mid-stair, so he might not avail to come up, summoned the young man, who came to her from his side by a very privy way. Thereupon they went to bed, and gave themselves a good time, taking their pleasure one of the other till daybreak, when the young man returned to his own house. Meanwhile, the jealous man stood to his arms well nigh all night beside the street door, sorry and supperless and dying of cold, and waited for the priest to come till near upon day, when, unable to watch any longer, he returned to the ground floor room, and there fell asleep. Towards tears he awoke, and the street door being now open, he made a show of returning from otherwhere, and went up into his house and dined. A little after, he sent a lad, as he were the priest's clerkling that had confessed her, to the lady to ask if she would have were come thither again. She knew the messenger well enough, and answered that he had not come thither that night, and that if he did thus he might haply pass out of her mind, albeit she wished it not. What more should I tell you? The jealous man abode on the watch night after night, looking to catch the priest at his entering in, and the lady still had a merry life with her lover the while. At length the cuckold, able to contain himself no longer, asked his wife, with an angry air, what she had said to the priest the morning she had confessed herself to him. She answered that she would not tell him, for that it was neither a just thing nor a seemly, whereupon, Foul woman that thou art, cried he, in despite of thee I know what thou saidst to him, and needs must I know the priest of whom thou art so mightily enamoured, and who, by means of his conjurations, leeth with thee every night, else will I slit thy weasand. She replied that it was not true that she was enamoured of any priest. How, cried the husband, saidst thou not thus and thus to the priest who confessed thee? And thou couldst not have reported it better, not to say if he had told it thee, but if thou hadst been present. I did tell him this. Then, rejoined the jealous man, tell me who is this priest, and that quickly. The lady fell a-smiling and answered, It rejoiceth me mightily to see a wise man led by the nose by a woman, even as one leadeth a ram by the horns to the shambles, albeit thou art no longer wise nor hast been since the hour when, unknowing why, thou sufferedst the malignant spirit of jealousy to enter thy breast, and the sillier and more besotted thou art, so much the less is my glory thereof. Deemest thou, husband mine, I am as blind of the eyes of the body as thou of those of the mind? Certes, no, I perceived at first sight who was the priest that confessed me, and know that thou wast he, but I had it at heart to give thee that which thou wentest seeking, and in sooth I have done it. Wert thou as wise as thou thinkest to be, thou wouldst not have essayed by this means to learn the secrets of thy good wife, but wouldst, without taking vain suspicion, have recognized that which she confessed to thee to be the very truth, without her having sinned in aught. I told thee that I loved a priest, and wast not thou, whom I am much to blame to love as I do, become a priest? I told thee that no door of my house could abide locked, whenas he had a mind to lie with me, and what door in the house was ever kept against thee, whenas thou wouldst come whereas I might be? I told thee that the priest lay with me every night, and when was it that thou layest not with me? And whensoever thou sentest thy clerk to me, which was thou knowest, as often as thou layest from me, I sent thee word that the priest had not been with me. What other than a crack brain like thee, who has suffered thyself to be blinded by thy jealousy, had failed to understand these things? Thou hast a bid den in the house, keeping watch o' nights, and thoughtest to have given me to believe that thou wast gone abroad to sup and sleep. Bethink thee henceforth and become a man again, as thou wast wont to be, and make not thyself a laughing-stock to whoso knoweth thy fashions, as do I, and leave this unconscionable watching that thou keepest, for I swear to God that, in the fancy took me to make thee wear the horns, I would engage, hadst thou 100 eyes, as thou hast but 2, to do my pleasure on such wise that thou shouldst not beware thereof. The jealous wretch, who thought to have very adroitly surprised his wife's secrets, hearing this, avouched himself befooled, and without answering other what, held the lady for virtuous and discreet, and whenas it behoved him to be jealous, he altogether divested himself of his jealousy, even as he had put it on, what time he had no need thereof. Wherefore the discreet lady, being in a manner licensed to do her pleasures, thenceforward no longer caused her lover to come to her by the roof, as go the cats, but e'en brought him in at the door, and, dealing advisedly, many a day thereafter gave herself a good time, and led a merry life with him. The 6th story. Madame Isabella, being in company with Leonetto her lover, is visited by one Messer Lambertuccio, of whom she is beloved. Her husband returning, unexpected, she sendeth Lambertuccio forth of the house, whinger in hand, and the husband after escorteth Leonetto home. The company were wonderwell pleased with Fiametta's story, all affirming that the lady had done excellently well and as it behoved unto such a brute of a man, and after it was ended, the king bade Pampinia follow on, who proceeded to say, There are many who, speaking ignorantly, avouch that love bereaveth folk of their senses and causeth whoso loveth to become witless. Meseemeth this is a foolish opinion, as hath indeed been well enough shown by the things already related, and I purpose yet again to demonstrate it. In our city, which aboundeth in all good things, there was once a young lady both gently born and very fair, who was the wife of a very worthy and notable gentleman, and as it happeneth often that folk cannot for ever brook one same food, but desire by times to vary their diet, this lady, her husband not altogether satisfying her, became enamored of a young man called Leonetto, and very well bred and agreeable, for all he was of no great extraction. He on likewise fell in love with her, and as you know that seldom doth that which both parties desire abide without effect, it was no great while before accomplishment was given to their loves. Now it chanced that, she being a fair and engaging lady, a gentleman called Messer Lambertuccio became sore enamored of her, whom, for that he seemed to her a disagreeable man and a tiresome, she could not for aught in the world bring herself to love. However, after soliciting her amain with messages, and it availing him not, he sent to her threatening her, for that he was a notable man, to dishonour her, and she did not his pleasure, wherefore she, fearful and knowing his character, submitted herself to do his will. It chanced one day that the lady, whose name was Madame Isabella, being gone, as is our custom in summer-time, to abide at a very goodly estate she had in the country, and her husband having ridden somewhither to pass some days abroad, she sent for Leonetto to come and be with her, whereat he was mightily rejoiced, and betook himself thither incontinent. Meanwhile Messer Lambertuccio, hearing that her husband was gone abroad, took horse and repairing, all alone, to her house, knocked at the door. The lady's waiting woman, seeing him, came straight to her mistress, who was closeted with Leonetto, and called to her, saying, "Madam, Messer Lambertuccio is below all alone." The lady, hearing this, was the wofullest woman in the world, but as she stood in great fear of Messer Lambertuccio, she besought Leonetto not to take it ill to hide himself a while behind the curtains of her bed till such time as the other should be gone. Accordingly, Leonetto, who feared him no less than did the lady, hid himself there, and she bade the maid go open to Messer Lambertuccio, which being done, he lighted down in the courtyard, and making his palfrey fast to a staple there, went up into the house. The lady put on a cheerful countenance, and coming to the head of the stair, received him with as good a grace as she might, and asked him what brought him thither, whereupon he caught her in his arms and clipped her and kissed her, saying, "My soul, I understood that your husband was abroad, and am come accordingly to be with you a while." After these words, they entered a bedchamber, where they locked themselves in, and Messer Lambertuccio fell to taking delight of her. As they were thus engaged, it befell, altogether out of the lady's expectation, that her husband returned, whom when the maid saw near the house, she ran in haste to the lady's chamber, and said, "Madam, here is my lord come back. Methinketh he is already below in the courtyard." When the lady heard this, bethinking her that she had 2 men in the house, and knowing that there was no hiding Messer Lambertuccio, by reason of his palfrey which was in the courtyard, she gave herself up for lost. Nevertheless, taking a sudden resolution, she sprang hastily down from the bed, and said to Messer Lambertuccio, "Sir, an you wish me anywise well, and would save me from death, do that which I shall bid you. Take your hanger naked in your hand, and go down the stair with an angry air, and all disordered, and begone, saying, I vow to God that I will take him elsewhere. And should my husband offer to detain you, or question you of aught, do you say no otherwhat than that which I have told you, but take horse, and look you abide not with him on any account." The gentleman answered that he would well, and accordingly, drawing his hanger, he did as she had enjoined him, with a face all afire what with the swink he had furnished, and with anger at the husband's return. The latter was by this dismounted in the courtyard, and marvelled to see the palfrey there. Then, offering to go up into the house, he saw Messer Lambertuccio come down, and wondering both at his words and his air, said, "What is this, sir?" Messer Lambertuccio, putting his foot in the stirrup, and mounting to horse, said not but, "Cock's body, I shall find him again otherwhere," and made off. The gentleman, going up, found his wife at the stair head, all disordered and fearful, and said to her, "What is all this? Whom goeth Messer Lambertuccio threatening thus in such a fury?" The lady, withdrawing towards the chamber where Leonetto was, so he might hear her, answered, "Sir, never had I the like of this fright. There came fleeing hither but now a young man, whom I know not, followed by Messer Lambertuccio, hanger in hand, and finding by chance the door of this chamber open, said to me, all trembling, For God's sake, madam, help me, that I be not slain in your arms." I rose to my feet, and was about to question him who he was, and what ailed him, when, behold, in rushed Messer Lambertuccio, saying, "Where art thou, traitor?" I set myself before the chamber door and hindered him from entering, and he was in so far courteous that, after many words, seeing it pleased me not that he should enter there, he went his way down, as you have seen. Quoth the husband, Wife, thou didst well. It were too great a reproach to us, had a man been slain in our house, and Messer Lambertuccio did exceeding unmannerly to follow a person who had taken refuge here. Then he asked where the young man was, and the lady answered, Indeed, sir, I know not where he hath hidden himself. Then said the husband, Where art thou? Come forth in safety. Whereupon Leonetto, who had heard everything, came forth all trembling for fear, as indeed he had had a great fright, of the place where he had hidden himself, and the gentleman said to him, What hast thou to do with Messer Lambertuccio? Sir, answered he, I have nothing in the world to do with him, wherefore methinketh assuredly he is either not in his right wits, or he hath mistaken me for another. For that no sooner did he set eyes on me in the road not far from this house than he forthright clapped his hand to his hanger and said, Traitor, thou art a dead man. I stayed not to ask why, but took to my heels as best I might and made my way hither, where, thanks to God and to this gentlewoman, I have escaped. Quoth the husband, Go to, have no fears, I will bring thee to thine own house safe and sound, and thou canst after seek out what thou hast to do with him. Accordingly, when they had supped, he mounted him a horseback, and carrying him back to Florence, left him in his own house. As for Leonetto, that same evening, according as he had been lessoned of the lady, he privily bespoke Messer Lambertuccio and took such order with him, albeit there was much talk of the matter thereafterward. The husband never for all that became aware of the cheat that had been put on him by his wife. The seventh story. Lodovico discovereth to Madame Beatrice the love he beareth her, whereupon she sendeth Egino her husband into the garden, in her own favour, and Leith meanwhile with Lodovico, who, presently arising, goeth and cudgelleth Egino in the garden. Madame Isabella's presence of mind, as related by Pampinea, was held admirable by all the company, but, whilst they yet marvelled thereat, Philomena, whom the king had appointed to follow on, said, Lovesome ladies, and I mistake not, methinketh I can tell you no less goodly a story on the same subject, and that forthright. You must know, then, that there was once in Paris a Florentine gentleman who was for poverty turned merchant, and had thriven so well in commerce that he was grown thereby very rich. He had by his lady one only son, whom he had named Lodovico, and for that he might concern himself with his father's nobility and not with trade, he had willed not to place him in any warehouse, but had sent him to be with other gentlemen in the service of the King of France, where he learned store of goodly manners and other fine things. During his sojourn there, it befell that certain gentlemen, who were returned from visiting the Holy Sepulchre, coming in upon a conversation between certain young men, of whom Lodovico was one, and hearing them discourse among themselves of the fair ladies of France and England and other parts of the world, one of them began to say that assuredly, in all the lands he had traversed, and for all the ladies he had seen, he had never beheld the like for beauty of Madame Beatrice, the wife of Messer Egino de Giuluzzi of Bologna, to which all his companions, who had with him seen her at Bologna, agreed. Lodovico, who had never yet been enamored of any woman, hearkening to this, was fired with such longing to see her that he could hold his thought to nothing else, and being altogether resolved to journey to Bologna for that purpose, and there, if she pleased him, to abide a while, he feigned to his father that he had a mind to go visit the Holy Sepulchre, the which with great difficulty he obtained of him. Accordingly, taking the name of Onicino, he set out for Bologna, and on the day following his arrival, as fortune would have it, he saw the lady in question at an entertainment, where she seemed to him fairer far than he had imagined her, wherefore, falling most ardently enamored of her, he resolved never to depart Bologna till he should have gained her love. Then, devising in himself what course he should take to this end, he bethought himself, leaving be all other means, that and he might but avail to become one of her husband's servants, whereof he entertained many, he might peradventure compass that which he desired. Accordingly, Having sold his horses and disposed as best might be of his servants, bidding them make a show of knowing him not, he entered into discourse with his host and told him that he would fain engage for a servant with some gentleman of condition. Could such an one be found? Quoth the host, Thou art the right serving man to please a gentleman of the city, by name Egino, who keepeth many and will have them all well looking, as thou art. I will bespeak him of the matter. As he said, so he did, and ere he took leave of Egino, he had brought Anicino to an accord with him, to the exceeding satisfaction of the latter, who, abiding with Egino and having abundant opportunity of seeing his lady often, proceeded to serve him so well and so much to his liking that he set such store by him that he could do nothing without him, and committed to him the governance, not of himself alone, but of all his affairs. It chanced one day that, Egino being gone a-fowling and having left Anicino at home, Madame Beatrice, who was not yet become aware of his love for her, albeit, considering him, and his fashions, she had ofttimes much commended him to herself, and he pleased her, fell to playing chess with him, and he, desiring to please her, very adroitly contrived to let himself be beaten, whereat the lady was marvellously rejoiced. Presently, all her women having gone away from seeing them play, and left them playing alone, Anicino heaved a great sigh, whereupon she looked at him and said, What aileth thee, Anicino? Doth it irk thee that I should beat thee? Madam, answered he, a far greater thing than that was the cause of my sighing. Quoth the lady, Prithee, as thou wishest me well, tell it me. When Anicino heard himself conjured, As thou wishest me well, by her whom he loved over all else, he heaved a sigh yet heavier than the first, wherefore the lady besought him anew that it would please him tell her the cause of his sighing. Madam, replied Anicino, I am sore fearful lest it displease you, if I tell it you, and moreover I misdoubt me you will tell it again to others. Whereto rejoined she, Certes, it will not displease me, and thou mayst be assured that, whatsoever thou sayest to me I will never tell to any, save when as it shall please thee. Quoth he, Since you promise me this, I will e'en tell it you. Then, with tears in his eyes, he told her who he was, and what he had heard of her and when, and how he was become enamored of her, and why he had taken service with her husband, and after humbly besought her that it would please her have compassion on him, and comply with him in that his secret, and so fervent desire, and in case she willed not to do this, that she should suffer him to love her, leaving him be in that his then present guise. O singular blandness of the Bolognese blood! How art thou still to be commended in such circumstance? Never wast thou desirous of tears or sighs, still wast thou compliant unto prayers and amenable unto amorous desires. Had I words worthy to commend thee, my voice should never weary of singing thy praises. The gentle lady, what while Anicino spoke, kept her eyes fixed on him, and giving full credence to his words, received, by the prevalence of his prayers, the love of him with such might into her heart, that she also fell a-sighing and presently answered, Sweet my Anicino, be of good courage, neither presents nor promises nor solicitations of nobleman or gentleman or other, for I have been and am yet courted of many, have ever availed to move my heart to love any one of them. But thou, in this small space of time that thy words have lasted, hast made me far more thine than mine own. Methinketh thou hast right well earned my love, wherefore I give it thee and promise thee that I will cause thee have enjoyment thereof ere this next night be altogether spent. And that this may have effect, look thou come to my chamber about midnight. I will leave the door open, thou knowest which side the bed I lie. Do thou come thither, and if I sleep, touch me so I may awake, and I will ease thee of this so long desire that thou hast had. And that thou mayst believe this that I say, I will e'en give thee a kiss by way of alls. Accordingly, throwing her arms about his neck, she kissed him amorously, and he on like wise kissed her. These things said, he left her and went to do certain occasions of his, awaiting with the greatest gladness in the world the coming of the night. Presently, Egino returned from fowling and being weary, betook himself to bed, as soon as he had supper, and after him the lady, who left the chamber door open, as she had promised. Thither, at the appointed hour, came Anichino, and softly entering the chamber, shut the door again from within. Then, going up to the bed on the side where the lady lay, he put his hand to her breast and found her awake. As soon as she felt him come, she took his hand in both her own and held it fast. Then, turning herself about in the bed, she did on such wise that Egino, who was asleep, awoke. Whereupon quoth she to him, I would not say aught to thee yestereve, for that me seemed thou was weary, but tell me, Egino, so God save thee, whom holdest thou thy best and trustiest servant, and him who most loveth thee of those whom thou hast in the house? Wife, answered Egino, what is this whereof thou askest me? Knowest thou it not? I have not, nor had I any in whom I so trusted and whom I loved as I love and trust in Anichino. But why dost thou ask me thereof? Anichino, seeing Egino awake and hearing talk of himself, was sore afraid lest the lady had a mind to cozen him, and offered again and again to draw his hand away, so he might be gone, but she held it so fast that he could not win free. Then said she to Egino, I will tell thee. I also believed till today that he was even such as thou sayest, and that he was more loyal to thee than any other, but he hath undeceived me, for that, what while thou wentest a-fowling today, he abode here, and when as it seemed to him time, he was not ashamed to solicit me to yield myself to his pleasures, and I, so I might make thee touch and see this thing, and that it might not behove me certify thee thereof with too many proofs, replied that I would well, and that this very night, after midnight, I would go into our garden and there await him at the foot of the pine. Now for my part one mean not to go thither, but thou have a mind to know thy servant's fidelity, thou mayst lightly do it by donning a gown and a veil of mine, and going down yonder to wait and see if he will come thither, as I am assured he will. Egino hearing this, answered, Certes, needs must I go see, and rising, donned one of the lady's gowns, as best he knew in the dark. Then, covering his head with a veil, he betook himself to the garden and proceeded to await Anichino at the foot of the pine. As for the lady, as soon as she knew him gone forth of the chamber, she arose and locked the door from within, whilst Anichino, who had had the greatest fright he had ever known, and had enforced himself as most he might to escape from the lady's hands, cursing her and her love and himself who had trusted in her 100,000 times, seeing this that she had done in the end, was the joyfullest man that was I. Then, she having returned to bed, he, at her bidding, put off his clothes, and coming to bed to her, they took delight and pleasure together a pretty while, after which, her seeming he should not abide longer, she caused him arise and dress himself, and said to him, Sweetheart, do thou take a stout cudgel and get thee to the garden, and there, feigning to have solicited me to try me, rate Egino, as he were I, and ring me a good peal of bells on his back with the cudgel, for that thereof will ensue to us marvellous pleasance and delight. Anichino accordingly repaired to the garden, with a sallow stick in his hand, and Egino, seeing him draw near the pine, rose up and came to meet him, as he would receive him with the utmost joy, whereupon quoth Anichino, Ah, wicked woman! Art thou then come hither, and thinkest thou I would do my lord such a wrong? 1,000 times I'll come to thee. Then, raising the cudgel, he began to lay on to him. Egino, hearing this and seeing the cudgel, took to his heels, without saying a word, whilst Anichino still followed after him, saying, Go to, God give thee an ill year, foul woman that thou art. I will certainly tell it to Egino tomorrow morning. Egino made his way back to the chamber as quickly as he might, having gotten sundry good clouts, and being questioned of the lady if Anichino had come to the garden, would God he had not, answered he. For that, taking me for thee, he hath cudgelled me to a mummy, and given me the soundest rating that was I bestowed upon lewd woman. Certes, I marvelled sore at him that he should have said these words to thee, with intent to do aught that might be a shame to me, but, for that he saw thee so blithe and gamesome, he had a mind to try thee. Then said the lady, Praised be God that he hath tried me with words and thee with deeds. Methinketh he may say that I suffered his words more patiently than thou his deeds. But since he is so loyal to thee, it behoveth thee hold him dear and do him honor. Certes, answered Egino, thou sayst sooth, and reasoning by this, he concluded that he had the truest wife and the trustiest servant that ever gentleman had, by reason whereof, albeit both he and the lady made merry more than once with Onicino over this adventure, the latter and his mistress had leisure enough of that which belike, but for this they would not have had, to wit, to do that which afforded them pleasance and delight, that while it pleased Onicino abide with Egino in Bologna. The 8th story. A man waxeth jealous of his wife, who bindeth a piece of packthread to her great toe o' nights, so she may have notice of her lover's coming. One night her husband becometh aware of this device, and what while he pursueth the lover, the lady putteth another woman to bed in her room. This latter the husband beateth and cutteth off her hair, then fetcheth his wife's brothers, who, finding his story seemingly untrue, give him hard words. It seemed to them all that Madame Beatrice had been extraordinarily ingenious in cousining her husband, and all agreed that Onicino's fright must have been very great, whenas, being the while held fast by the lady, he heard her say that he had required her of love. But the king, seeing Philomela silent, turned to Neophile and said to her, Do you tell? Whereupon she, smiling first a little, began, Fair ladies, I have a hard task before me if I desire to pleasure you with a goodly story, as those of you have done, who have already told, but, with God's aid, I trust to discharge myself thereof well enough. You must know, then, that there was once in our city a very rich merchant called Araguccio Berlingueri, who, foolishly thinking, as merchants yet do every day, to ennoble himself by marriage, took to wife a young gentlewoman ill-sorting with himself, by name Madame Sismonda, who, for that he, merchant-like, was much abroad and sojourned little with her, fell in love with a young man called Ruberto, who had long courted her and clapped up a lover's privacy with him, using belike over little discretion in her dealings with her lover, for that they were supremely delightsome to her. It chanced that, whether Araguccio scented aught of the matter or how else soever it happened, the latter became the most jealous man alive, and leaving be his going about and all his other concerns, applied himself well nigh altogether to the keeping good watch over his wife, nor would he ever fall asleep, except he first felt her come into the bed, by reason whereof the lady suffered the utmost chagrin, for that on no wise might she avail to be with her Ruberto. However, after pondering many devices for finding a means to foregather with him, and being to boot continually solicited thereof by him, it presently occurred to her to do on this wise, to wit, having many a time observed that Araguccio tarried long to fall asleep, but after slept very soundly, she determined to cause Ruberto come about midnight to the door of the house, and to go open to him and abide with him what while her husband slept fast. And that she might know when he should be come, she bethought herself to hang a twine out of the window of her bedchamber, which looked upon the street, on such wise that none might perceive it, one end whereof should well nigh reach the ground, whilst she carried the other end along the floor of the room to the bed, and hid it under the clothes, meaning to make it fast to her great toe, whenas she should be abed. Accordingly, she sent to acquaint Ruberto with this, and charged him, when he came, to pull the twine, whereupon, if her husband slept, she would let it go and come to open to him, but if he slept not, she would hold it fast and draw it to herself, so he should not wait. The device pleased Ruberto, and going thither frequently, he was whiles able to foregather with her and whiles not. On this wise they continued to do till, one night, the lady being asleep, it chanced that her husband stretched out his foot in bed and felt the twine, whereupon he put his hand to it, and finding it made fast to his wife's toe, said in himself, This should be some trick. And presently perceiving that the twine led out of window, he held it for certain. Accordingly, he cut it softly from the lady's toe, and making it fast to his own, abode on the watch to see what this might mean. He had not waited long before up came Ruberto and pulled at the twine, as of his wont, Whereupon Aragucho started up, but he not having made the twine well fast to his toe and Ruberto pulling hard, it came loose in the latter's hand, whereby he understood that he was to wait, and did so. As for Aragucho, he arose in haste and taking his arms, ran to the door, to see who this might be and do him a mischief, for, albeit a merchant, he was a stout fellow and a strong. When he came to the door, he opened it not softly as the lady was used to do, which when Ruberto, who was a wait, observed, he guessed how the case stood, to wit, that it was Aragucho who opened the door, and accordingly made off in haste, and the other after him. At last, having fled a great way and Aragucho stinting not from following him, Ruberto, being also armed, drew his sword and turned upon his pursuer, whereupon they fell to blows, the one attacking and the other defending himself. Meanwhile, the lady, awaking as Aragucho opened the chamber door, and finding the twine cut from her toe, knew incontinent that her device was discovered, whereupon, perceiving that her husband had run after her lover, she arose in haste and, foreseeing what might happen, called her maid, who knew all, and conjured her to such purpose that she prevailed with her to take her own place in the bed, beseeching her patiently to endure, without discovering herself, whatsoever buffets Aragucho might deal her, for that she would requite her therefore on such wise that she should have no cause to complain, after which she did out the light that burnt in the chamber, and going forth thereof, hid herself in another part of the house, and there began to await what should betide. Meanwhile, the people of the quarter, aroused by the noise of the affray between Aragucho and Ruberto, arose and fell a-railing at them, whereupon the husband, fearing to be known, let the youth go, without having availed to learn who he was or to do him any hurt, and returned to his house, full of rage and despite. There, coming into the chamber, he cried out angrily, saying, "Where art thou, vile woman? Thou hast done out the light, so I may not find thee, but thou art mistaken." Then, coming to the bedside, he seized upon the maid, thinking to take his wife, and laid on to her so lustily with cuffs and kicks, as long as he could wag his hands and feet, that he bruised all her face, ending by cutting off her hair, still giving her the while the hardest words that were ever said to worthless woman. The maid wept sore, as indeed she had good cause to do, and albeit she said whiles, "Alas, mercy, for God's sake," and "Oh, no more," her voice was so broken with sobs, and Aragucho was so hindered with his rage that he never discerned it to be that of another woman than his wife. Having, then, as we have said, beaten her to good purpose and cut off her hair, he said to her, "Wicked woman that thou art, I mean not to touch thee otherwise, but shall now go fetch thy brothers and acquaint them with thy fine doings, and after bid them come for thee and deal with thee as they shall deem may do them honor, and carry thee away, for assuredly in this house thou shalt abide no longer." So saying, he departed the chamber, and locking the door from without, went away all alone. As soon as Madame Sismonda, who had heard all, was certified of her husband's departure, she opened the door and, rekindling the light, found her maid all bruised and weeping sore, whereupon she comforted her as best she might, and carried her back to her own chamber, where she after caused privily tend her and care for her, and so rewarded her of Aragucho's own moneys that she avouched herself content. No sooner had she done this than she hastened to make the bed in her own chamber, and all re-established it, and set it in such order as if none had lain there that night, after which she dressed and tired herself, as if she had not yet gone to bed. Then, lighting a lamp, she took her clothes and seated herself at the stair-head, where she proceeded to sew and await the issue of the affair. Meanwhile Aragucho betook himself in all haste to the house of his wife's brothers, and there knocked so long and so loudly that he was heard, and it was opened to him. The lady's 3 brothers and her mother, hearing that it was Aragucho, rose all, and letting kindle lights, came to him and asked what he went seeking at that hour and alone. Whereupon, Beginning from the twine he had found tied to wife's toe, he recounted to them all that he had discovered and done, and to give them entire proof of the truth of his story, he put into their hands the hair he thought to have cut from his wife's head, ending by requiring them to come for her and do with her that which they should judge pertinent to their honor, for that he meant to keep her no longer in his house. The lady's brothers, hearing this and holding it for certain, were sore incensed against her, and letting kindle torches, set out to accompany Araguccio to his house, meaning to do her a mischief, which their mother seeing, she followed after them, weeping and entreating now the one, now the other not to be in such haste to believe these things of their sister, without seeing or knowing more of the matter, for that her husband might have been angered with her for some other cause and have maltreated her, and might now allege this in his own excuse, adding that she marveled exceedingly how this whereof he accused her could have happened, for that she knew her daughter well, as having reared her from a little child, with many other words to the like purpose. When they came to Araguccio's house, they entered and proceeded to mount the stair, whereupon Madame Sismonda, hearing them come, said, "Who is there?" To which one of her brothers answered, "Thou shalt soon know who it is, foul woman that thou art." "God aid us," cried she. "What meaneth this?" Then, rising to her feet, "Brothers mine," quoth she, "you are welcome. But what go you all three seeking at this hour?" The brothers, seeing her seated sewing, with no sign of beating on her face, whereas Araguccio avouched that he had beaten her to a mummy, began to marvel, and curbing the violence of their anger, demanded of her how that had been whereof Araguccio accused her, threatening her sore, and she told them not all. Quoth she, "I know not what you would have me say, nor of what Araguccio can have complained to you of me." Araguccio, seeing her thus, eyed her as if he had lost his wits, remembering that he had dealt her belike 1,000 buffets on the face, and scratched her and done her all the ill in the world, and now he beheld her as if nothing of all this had been. Her brothers told her briefly what they had heard from Araguccio, twine and beating and all, whereupon she turned to him and said, "Alack, husband mine, what is this I hear? Why wilt thou make me pass, to thine own great shame, for an ill woman, whereas I am none, and thyself for a cruel and wicked man, which thou art not? When wast thou in this house tonight till now, let alone with me? When didst thou beat me? For my part, I have no remembrance of it." "How, foul woman that thou art," cried he, "did we not go to bed together here? Did I not return hither after running after thy lover? Did I not deal thee 1,000 buffets and cut off thy hair?" "Thou wentest not to bed in this house tonight," replied Sismonda. "But let that pass, for I can give no proof thereof other than mine own true words, and let us come to that which thou sayest, to wit, that thou didst beat me and cut off my hair. Me thou hast never beaten, and do all who are here and thou thyself take note of me, if I have any mark of beating in any part of my person. Indeed, I should not counsel thee make so bold as to lay a hand on me, for, by Christ's cross, I would mar thy face for thee. Neither didst thou cut off my hair, for aught that I felt or saw, but haply thou didst it on such wise that I perceived it not. Let me see if I have it shorn or no." Then, putting off her veil from her head, she showed that she had her hair unshorn and whole. Her mother and brothers, seeing and hearing all this, turned upon her husband and said to him, "What meanest thou, Araguccio? This is not that so far which thou camest to tell us thou hadst done, and we know not how thou wilt make good the rest." Araguccio stood as one in a trance and would have spoken, but, seeing that it was not as he thought he could show, he dared say nothing, whereupon the lady, turning to her brothers, said to them, "Brothers mine, I see he hath gone seeking to have me do what I have never yet chosen to do, to wit, that I should acquaint you with his lewdness and his vile fashions, and I will do it. I firmly believe that this he hath told you hath verily befallen him, and that he hath done as he saith, and you shall hear how. This worthy man, to whom in an ill hour for me you gave me to wife, who calleth himself a merchant, and would be thought a man of credit, this fellow, forsooth, who should be more temperate than a monk and chaster than a maid, There be few knights, but he goeth fuddling himself about the taverns, foregathering now with this lewd woman and now with that, and keeping me waiting for him, on such wise as you find me, half the night, and whiles even till morning. I doubt not but that, having well drunken, he went to bed with some trull of his and waking, found the twine on her foot, and after did all these his fine feats whereof he telleth, winding up by returning to her and beating her and cutting off her hair. And not being yet well come to himself, he fancied, and I doubt not yet fancieth, that he did all this to me, and if you look him well in the face, you will see he is yet half fuddled. Algates, whatsoever he may have said of me, I will not have you take it to yourselves except as a drunken man's talk, and since I forgive him, do you also pardon him. Her mother, hearing this, began to make an outcry and say, By Christ his cross, daughter mine, it shall not pass thus. Nay, he should rather be slain for a thankless, ill-conditioned dog, who was never worthy to have a girl of thy fashion to wife. Marry, a fine thing, forsooth. He could have used thee no worse, had he picked thee up out of the dirt. Devil take him, if thou shalt abide at the mercy of the spite of a paltry little merchant of asses' dung. They come to us out of their pigsties in the country, clad in homespun frieze, with their bag breeches and pen and arse, and as soon as they have gotten a leash of groats, they must e'en have the daughters of gentlemen and right ladies to wife, and bear arms and say, I am of such a family, and those of my house did thus and thus. Would God my sons had followed my counsel in the matter, for that they might have stablished thee so worshipfully in the family of the Counts Guidi, with a crust of bread to thy dowry. But they must needs give thee to this fine jewel of fellow, who, whereas thou art the best girl in Florence and the modestest, is not ashamed to knock us up in the middle of the night, to tell us that thou art a strumpet, as if we knew thee not. But, by God his faith, and they would be ruled by me, he should get such a trouncing therefore that he should stink for it. Then, turning to the lady's brothers, my sons, said she, I told you this could not be. Have you heard how your fine brother-in-law here entreateth your sister? 4-farthing huckster that he is. Were I in your shoes, he having said what he hath of her and doing that which he doth, I would never hold myself content nor appeased till I had rid the earth of him, and were I a man as I am a woman, I would trouble none other than myself to dispatch his business. Confound him for a sorry drunken beast that hath no shame. The young men, seeing and hearing all this, turned upon Aragucho and gave him the soundest rating ever Losel got, and ultimately they said to him, We pardon thee this as to a drunken man, but as thou tenderest thy life, look henceforward we hear no more news of this kind, for, if aught of the like come ever again to our ears, we will pay thee at once for this and for that. So saying, they went their ways, leaving Aragucho all aghast, as it were he had taken leave of his wits, unknowing in himself whether that which he had done had really been or whether he had dreamed it, wherefore he made no more words thereof, but left his wife in peace. Thus the lady, by her ready wit, not only escaped the imminent peril that threatened her, but opened herself away to do her every pleasure in time to come, without evermore having any fear of her husband. The 9th story. Lydia, wife of Nicostratus, loveth Pyrrhus, who, so he may believe it, requireth of her 3 things, all which she doth. Moreover, she solaceth herself with him in the presence of Nicostratus, and mocketh the latter believe that that which he hath seen is not real. Neophile's story so pleased the ladies that they could neither give over to laugh at nor to talk of it, albeit the king, having bidden Pamphilo tell his story, had several times imposed silence upon them. However, after they had held their peace, Pamphilo began thus, I do not believe, worshipful ladies, that there is anything, how hard and doubtful soever it be, that whoso loveth passionately will not dare to do, the which, albeit it hath already been demonstrated in many stories, methinketh, nevertheless, I shall be able yet more plainly to show forth to you in one which I purpose to tell you, and wherein you shall hear of a lady, who was in her actions much more favoured of fortune than well advised of reason, wherefore I would not counsel any one to adventure herself in the footsteps of her of whom I am to tell, For that fortune is not always well disposed, nor are all men in the world equally blind. In Argos, city of Achaea, far more famous for its kings of pastime than great in itself, there was once a nobleman called Nicostratus, to whom, when already neighboring on old age, fortune awarded a lady of great family to wife, whose name was Lydia, and who was no less high-spirited than fair. Nicostratus, like a nobleman and a man of wealth as he was, kept many servants and hounds and hawks, and took the utmost delight in the chase. Among his other servants he had a young man called Pyrrhus, who was sprightly and well-bred and comely of his person and adroit in all that he had a mind to do, and him he loved and trusted over all else. Of this Pyrrhus Lydia became so sore enamored that neither by day nor by night could she have her thought otherwhere than with him, but he, whether it was that he perceived not her liking for him, or that he would none of it, appeared to reck nothing thereof. By reason whereof the lady suffered intolerable chagrin in herself, and being altogether resolved to give him to know of her passion, called a chamberwoman of hers, Lusca by name, in whom she much trusted, and said to her, Lusca, the favors thou hast had of me should make thee faithful and obedient. Wherefore look thou none ever know that which I shall presently say to thee, save he to whom I shall charge thee tell it. As thou sayest, Lusca, I am a young and lusty lady, abundantly endowed with all those things which any woman can desire. In brief, I can complain of but one thing, to wit, that my husband's years are overmany, and they be measured by mine own. Wherefore I fare but ill in the matter of that thing wherein young women take most pleasure, and none the less desiring it, as other women do, I have this long while determined in myself, since fortune hath been thus little my friend in giving me so old a husband, that I will not be so much mine own enemy as not to contrive to find means for my pleasures and my weal, which that I may have as complete in this as in other things, I have bethought myself to will that our Pyrrhus, as being worthier thereof than any other, should furnish them with his embracements. Nay, I have vowed him so great a love that I never feel myself at ease save when as I see him or think of him, and except I foregather with him without delay, methinketh I shall certainly die thereof. Wherefore, if my life be dear to thee, thou wilt, on such wise as shall seem best to thee, signify to him any love and beseech him, on my part, to be pleased to come to me, whenas thou shalt go for him. The chamberwoman replied that she would well, and taking Pyrrhus apart, whenas first it seemed to her time and place, she did her lady's errand to him as best she knew. Pyrrhus, hearing this, was sore amazed thereat, as one who had never anywise perceived aught of the matter, and misdoubted him the lady had let say this to him to try him, wherefore he answered roughly and hastily, Lusca, I cannot believe that these words come from my lady, wherefore, have a care what thou sayest, or, if they do indeed come from her, I do not believe that she caused thee say them with intent, and, even if she did so, my lord doth me more honor than I deserve, and I would not for my life do him such an outrage. Wherefore look thou bespeak me no more of such things. Lusca, nowise daunted by his austere speech, said to him, Pyrrhus, I will e'en bespeak thee both of this, and of everything else wherewithal my lady shall charge me when, and as often as she shall bid me, whether it cause thee pleasure or annoy, but thou art an ass. Then, somewhat despite at his words, she returned to her mistress, who, hearing what Pyrrhus had said, wished for death, but some days after. She again bespoke the chamberwoman of the matter, and said to her, Lusca, thou knowest that the oak falleth not for the first stroke, wherefore meseemeth well that thou return anew to him who so strangely willeth to abide loyal to my prejudice, and, taking a sortable occasion, throughly discover to him my passion, and do thine every endeavour that the thing may have effect, for that, an it fall through thus, I shall assuredly die of it. Moreover, he will think to have been befooled, and whereas we seek to have his love, hate will ensue thereof. The maid comforted her, and going in quest of Pyrrhus found him merry and well disposed, and said to him, Pyrrhus, I showed thee, a few days agone, in what a fire my lady and thine abideth for the love she beareth thee, and now anew I certify thee thereof, for that, and thou persist in the rigour thou showedst the other day, thou mayst be assured that she will not live long. Wherefore I prithee be pleased to satisfy her of her desire, and if thou yet abide fast in thine obstinacy, whereas I have still accounted thee mighty discreet, I shall hold thee a blockhead. What can be a greater glory for thee than that such a lady, so fair and so noble, should love thee over all else? Besides, how greatly shouldst thou acknowledge thyself beholden unto fortune, seeing that she proffereth thee a thing of such worth and so conformable to the desires of thy youth, and to boot, such a resource for thy necessities. Which of thy peers knowest thou who fareth better by way of delight than thou mayst fare, and thou be wise? What other couldst thou find who may fare so well in the matter of arms and horses and apparel and moneys as thou mayst do, so thou wilt but vouchsafe thy love to this lady? Open, then, thy mind to my words and return to thy senses. Bethink thee that once, and no oftener, it is wont to betide that fortune cometh unto a man with smiling face and open arms, who when he know not then to welcome. If after he find himself poor and beggarly, he hath himself, and not her to blame. Besides, there is no call to use that loyalty between servants and masters that behoveth between friends and kinsfolk. Nay, servants should use their masters in so far as they may, like as themselves are used of them. Thinkest thou, and thou hadst a fair wife or mother or daughter or sister who pleased Nicostratus, that he would go questing after this loyalty that thou wouldst fain observe towards him in respect of this lady? Thou art a fool, if thou think thus, for thou mayst hold it for certain that, if blandishments and prayers sufficed him not, he would not scruple to use force in the matter, whatsoever thou mightest deem thereof. Let us, then, entreat them and their affairs even as they entreat us and ours. Profit by the favour of fortune, and drive her not away, but welcome her with open arms and meet her halfway, for assuredly, an thou do it not, thou wilt yet leave alone the death that will without fail ensue thereof to thy lady. Repent thee thereof so many a time thou wilt be fain to die therefore. Pyrrhus, who had again and again pondered the words that Lusca had said to him, had determined, and she should return to him, to make her another guess answer, and altogether to submit himself to comply with the lady's wishes. So, but he might be certified that it was not a trick to try him, and accordingly answered, Harkee, Lusca, all that thou sayest to me I allow to be true, but on the other hand, I know my lord for very discreet and well advised, and as he committeth all his affairs to my hands, I am sore adread lest Lydia, with his counsel and by his wish, do this to try me. Wherefore, an it please her for mine assurance, do 3 things that I shall ask. She shall for certain thereafterward command me not, but I will do it forthright. And the 3 things I desire are these: first, that in Nicostratus his presence she slay his good hawk; secondly, that she send me a lock of her husband's beard; and lastly, one of his best teeth. These conditions seemed hard unto Lusca, and to the lady harder yet. However, love, who is an excellent comforter and a past master in shifts and devices, made her resolve to do his pleasure, and accordingly she sent him word by her chamberwoman that she would punctually do what he required, and that quickly, and that over and above this, for that he deemed Nicostratus so well advised. She would solace herself with him in her husband's presence, and make the latter believe that it was not true. Pyrrhus, accordingly, began to await what the lady should do, and Nicostratus having, a few days after, made, as he oftentimes used to do, a great dinner to certain gentlemen, Madame Lydia, when as the tables were cleared away, came forth of her chamber, clad in green samite and richly bedecked, and entered the saloon where the guests were. There, in the sight of Pyrrhus and of all the rest, she went up to the perch, whereon was the hawk that Nicostratus held so dear, and cast it loose, as she would set it on her hand. Then, taking it by the jesses, she dashed it against the wall and killed it. Whereupon Nicostratus cried out at her, saying, Alack, wife, what hast thou done? She answered him nothing, but turning to the gentlemen who had eaten with him, she said to them, Gentlemen, I should ill know how to avenge myself on a king who did me a despite, and I dared not take my wreak of a hawk. You must know that this bird hath long robbed me of all the time which should of men be accorded to the pleasuring of the ladies, for that no sooner is the day risen than Nicostratus is up and dressed, and away he goeth a horseback, with his hawk on his fist, to the open plains, to see him fly, whilst I, such as you see me, abide in bed alone and ill content. Wherefore I have many a time had a mind to do that which I have now done, nor hath aught hindered me therefrom, but that I waited to do it in the presence of gentlemen who would be just judges in my quarrel, as methinketh you will be. The gentleman, hearing this, and believing her affection for Nicostratus to be no otherwise than as her words denoted, turned all to the latter, who was angered, and said, laughing, Ecod, how well hath the lady done to avenge herself of her wrong by the death of the hawk? Then, with divers of pleasantries upon the subject, the lady being now gone back to her chamber, they turned Nicostratus his annoy into laughter. Whilst Pyrrhus, seeing all this, said in himself, The lady hath given a noble beginning to my happy loves, God grant she persevere. Lydia having thus slain the hawk, not many days were past when, being in her chamber with Nicostratus, she fell to toying and frolicking with him, and he, pulling her some deal by the hair, by way of sport, gave her occasion to accomplish the second thing required of her by Pyrrhus. Accordingly, taking him of a sudden by a lock of his beard, she tugged so hard at it, laughing the while, that she plucked it clean out of his chin, whereof he complaining, How now, quoth she, what aileth thee to pull such a face? Is it because I have plucked out maybe half a dozen hairs of thy beard? Thou feltest not that which I suffered, whenas thou pulledst me now by the hair. On this wise continuing their disport from one word to another, she privily kept the lock of hair that she had plucked from his beard, and sent it that same day to her lover. Anent the last of the three things required by Pyrrhus, she was harder put to it for a device. Nevertheless, being of a surpassing wit and love making her yet quicker of invention, she soon bethought herself what means she should use to give it accomplishment. Nicostratus had 2 boys given him of their father, to the intent that, being of gentle birth, they might learn somewhat of manners and good breeding in his house, of whom, whenas he was at meat, one carved before him, and the other gave him to drink. Lydia called them both, and giving them to believe that they stank at the mouth, enjoined them that, whenas they served Nicostratus, they should still hold their heads backward as most they might nor ever tell this to any. The boys, believing that which she said, proceeded to do as she had lessoned them, and she after a while said to her husband one day, Hast thou noted that which yonder boys do, whenas they serve thee? I have, replied Nicostratus, and indeed I had it in mind to ask them why they did it. Quoth the lady, Do it not, for I can tell thee the reason, and I have kept it silent from thee this long while, not to cause thee annoy, but now I perceive that others begin to be aware thereof, it skilleth not to hide it from thee longer. This betteth thee for none other what than that thou stinkest terribly at the mouth, and I know not what can be the cause thereof, for that it used not to be thus. Now this is a very unseemly thing for thee who hast to do with gentlemen, and needs must we see for a means of curing it. Whereupon said he, What can this be? Can I have some rotten tooth in my head? Maybe I, answered Lydia, and carried him to a window, where she made him open his mouth, and after she had viewed it in every part, O Nicostratus, cried she, How canst thou have put up with it so long? Thou hast a tooth on this side which meseemeth is not only decayed, but altogether rotten, and assuredly, an thou keep it much longer in thy mouth, it will mar thee those which be on either side. Wherefore I counsel thee have it drawn, ere the thing go farther. Since it seemeth good to thee, answered he, I will well. Let a surgeon be sent for without more delay, who shall draw it for me. God forbid, rejoined the lady, that a surgeon come hither for that. Methinketh it lieth on such wise that I myself, without any surgeon, can very well draw it for thee. More by token that these same surgeons are so barbarous in doing such offices that my heart would on no account suffer me to see or know thee in the hands of any one of them. For, an it irk thee overmuch, I will at least loose thee incontinent, which a surgeon would not do. Accordingly, she let fetch the proper instruments and sent every one forth of the chamber, except only Leska, after which, locking herself in, she made Nicostratus lie down on a table and thrusting the pincers into his mouth. But while the maid held him fast, she pulled out one of his teeth by main force, albeit he roared out lustily for the pain. Then, keeping to herself that which she had drawn, she brought out a frightfully decayed tooth she had ready in her hand, and showed it to her husband, half dead as he was for pain, saying, "See what thou hast had in thy mouth all this while." Nicostratus believed what she said, and now that the tooth was out, for all he had suffered the most grievous pain and made sore complaint thereof, him seemed he was cured, and presently, having comforted himself with one thing and another, and the pain being abated, he went forth of the chamber, whereupon his wife took the tooth and straightway dispatched it to her gallant, who, being now certified of her love, professed himself ready to do her every pleasure. The lady, albeit every hour seemed to her 1,000 till she should be with him, desiring to give him farther assurance and wishful to perform that which she had promised him, made a show one day of being ailing and being visited after dinner by Nicostratus. With no one in his company but Pyrrhus, she prayed them, by way of allaying her unease, to help her go into the garden. Accordingly, Nicostratus taking her on one side and Pyrrhus on the other, they carried her into the garden and set her down on a grass plot at the foot of a fine pear tree, where, after they had sat a while, the lady, who had already given her gallant to know what he had to do, said, "Pyrrhus, I have a great desire to eat of yonder pears. Do thou climb up and throw us down some of them." Pyrrhus straightway climbed up into the tree and fell to throwing down of the pears, which as he did, he began to say, "How now, my lord? What is this you do? And you, madam, are you not ashamed to suffer it in my presence? Think you I am blind? But now you were sore disordered. How cometh it you have so quickly recovered that you do such things? And you have a mind unto this, you have store of goodly chambers, why go you not do it in one of these? It were more seemly than in my presence." The lady turned to her husband and said, "What saith Pyrrhus? Doth he rave?" "No, madam," answered the young man, "I rave not. Think you I cannot see?" As for Nicostratus, he marveled sore and said, "Verily, Pyrrhus, methinketh thou dreamest." "My lord," replied Pyrrhus, "I dream not a jot, neither do you dream. Nay, you bestir yourselves on such wise that were this tree to do likewise, there would not be a pear left on it." Quoth the lady, "What may this be? Can it be that this he saith appeareth to him to be true? So God save me, and I were whole as I was aforetime, I would climb up into the tree, to see what marvels are those which this fellow saith he seeth." Meanwhile Pyrrhus, from the top of the pear tree, still said the same thing and kept up the pretense, whereupon Nicostratus bade him come down. Accordingly he came down, and his master said to him, "Now, what say'st thou sawest?" "Methinketh," answered he, "you take me for a lackwit or a loggerhead. Since I must needs say it, I saw you atop of your lady, and after, as I came down, I saw you arise and seat yourself where you presently are." "Assuredly," said Nicostratus, "thou dotest, for we have not stirred a jot, save as thou sayest, since thou climbest up into the pear tree." Whereupon quoth Pyrrhus, "What booteth it to make words of the matter? I certainly saw you, and if I did see you, it was atop of your own." Nicostratus waxed momently more and more astonished, insomuch that he said, "Needs must I see if this pear tree is enchanted, and if whoso is thereon seeth marvels." Thereupon he climbed up into the tree, and no sooner was he come to the top than the lady and Pyrrhus fell to solacing themselves together, which when Nicostratus saw, he began to cry out, saying, "Ah, vile woman that thou art, what is this thou dost? And thou, Pyrrhus, in whom I most trusted." So saying, he proceeded to descend the tree, whilst the lovers said, "We are sitting here." Then, seeing him come down, they reseated themselves whereas he had left them. As soon as he was down and saw his wife and Pyrrhus where he had left them, he fell a-railing at them, whereupon quoth Pyrrhus, "Now, verily, Nicostratus, I acknowledged that, as you said before, I must have seen falsely what while I was in the pear tree. Nor do I know it otherwise than by this, that I see and know yourself to have seen falsely in the like case. And that I speak the truth not else should be needful to certify you, but that you have regard to the circumstances of the case, and consider, if it be possible that your lady, who is the most virtuous of women and discreeter than any other of her sex, could, and she had a mind to outrage you on such wise, bring herself to do it before your very eyes. I speak not of myself, who would rather suffer myself to be torn limb-meal than so much as think of such a thing, much more come to do it in your presence. Wherefore the fault of this mis-seeing must needs proceed from the pear tree, for that all the world had not made me believe, but that you were in act to have carnal knowledge of your lady here. Had I not heard you say that it appeared to yourself that I did what I know most certainly I never thought, much less did. Thereupon the lady, feigning to be mightily incensed, rose to her feet and said, Ill luck betide thee, dost thou hold me so little of wit that, and I had a mind to such filthy fashions as thou wouldst have us believe thou sawest, I should come to do them before thy very eyes? Thou mayst be assured of this that, if ever the fancy took me thereof, I should not come hither. Marry, methinketh I should have sense enough to contrive it in one of our chambers, on such wise and after such a fashion that it would seem to me an extraordinary thing if ever thou camest to know of it. Nicostratus, him seeming that what the lady and Pyrrhus said was true, to wit, that they would never have ventured upon such an act there before himself, gave over words and reproaches and fell to discoursing of the strangeness of the fact and the miracle of the sight, which was thus changed unto whoso climbed up into the pear tree. But his wife, feigning herself chagrined for the ill thought he had shown of her, said, Verily, this pear tree shall never again, if I can help it, do me nor any other lady the like of this shame. Wherefore do thou run, Pyrrhus, and fetch a hatchet, and at one stroke avenge both thyself and me by cutting it down, albeit it were better yet lay it about Nicostratus his cosard, who, without any consideration, suffered the eyes of his understanding to be so quickly blinded, whenas, however certain, that which thou saidst might seem to those which thou hast in thy head, thou shouldst for naught in the world in the judgment of thy mind have believed or allowed that such a thing could be. Pyrrhus very readily fetched the hatchet and cut down the tree, which when the lady saw fallen, she said to Nicostratus, Since I see the enemy of mine honor overthrown, my anger is past, and graciously forgave her husband, who besought her thereof, charging him that it should never again happen to him to presume such a thing of her, who loved him better than herself. Accordingly, the wretched husband, thus befooled, returned with her and her lover to the palace, where many a time thereafterward Pyrrhus took delight and pleasance more at ease of Lydia and she of him. God grant us as much. The 10th story. Two Sienese love a lady, who is gossip to one of them. The latter dieth, and returning to his companion, according to promise made him, relateth to him how folk fare in the other world. It now rested only with the king to tell, and he accordingly, as soon as he saw the ladies quieted, who lamented the cutting down of the unoffending pear tree, began. It is a very manifest thing that every just king should be the first to observe the laws made by him, and he do otherwise, he must be adjudged a slave deserving of punishment, and not a king, into which offense and under which reproach I, who am your king, am in a manner constrained to fall. True it is that yesterday I laid down the law for today's discourses, purposing not this day to make use of my privilege, but submitting myself to the same obligation as you, to discourse of that whereof you have all discoursed. However, not only hath that story been told which I had thought to tell, but so many other and far finer things have been said upon the matter that, for my part, ransack my memory as I will, I can call nothing to mind, and must avouch myself unable to say aught anent such a subject that may compare with those stories which have already been told. Wherefore, it behoving me transgress against the law made by myself, I declare myself in advance ready, as one deserving of punishment, to submit to any forfeit which may be imposed on me, and so have recourse to my wonted privilege. Accordingly, dearest ladies, I say that Elise's story of Fra Rinaldo and his gossip and eke the simplicity of the Sienese have such efficacy that they induce me, letting be the cheats put upon foolish husbands by their wily wives, to tell you a slight story of them, which though it have in it no little of that which must not be believed, will natheless in part, at least, be pleasing to hear. There were, then, in Siena 2 young men of the people, whereof one was called Tingaccio Mini and the other Muccio di Tura. They abode at Porta Salagia and consorted well nigh never save one with the other. To all appearance they loved each exceedingly, and resorting, as men do, to churches and preachings, they had many a time heard tell of the happiness and of the misery that are, according to their deserts, allotted in the next world to the souls of those who die. Of which things desiring to have certain news and finding no way thereto, they promised one another that whichever of them died first should, and he might, return to him who abode on life, and give him tidings of that which he would fain know, and this they confirmed with an oath. Having come to this accord, and companying still together, as hath been said, it chanced that Tingaccio became godfather to a child which one Ambrogio Anselmini, abiding at Campo Regi, had of his wife, Mistress Mita by name, and from time to time visiting, together with Muccio, his gossip, who was a very fair and lovesome lady, he became, notwithstanding the gossipship, enamored of her. Muccio, on like wise, hearing her mightily commended of his friend, and being himself much pleased with her, fell in love with her, and each hid his love from the other, but not for one same reason. Tingaccio was careful not to discover it to Muccio, on account of the naughty deed which him seemed he did to love his gossip, and which he had been ashamed that any should know. Muccio, on the other hand, kept himself therefrom, for that he had already perceived that the lady pleased Tingaccio, whereupon he said in himself, if I discover this to him, he will wax jealous of me, and being able, as her gossip, to bespeak her at his every pleasure, he will, inasmuch as he may, bring me in ill savour with her, and so I shall never have of her aught that may please me. Things being at this pass, it befell that Tingaccio, having more leisure of discovering his every desire to the lady, contrived with acts and words so to do that he had his will of her, of which Muccio soon became aware, and albeit it sore misliked him, yet, hoping some time or other to compass his desire, he feigned ignorance thereof, so Tingaccio might not have cause or occasion to do him an ill turn or hinder him in any of his affairs. The two friends loving thus, the one more happily than the other, it befell that Tingaccio, finding the soil of his gossip's domain soft and eath to till, so delved and laboured there that there overcame him thereof a malady, which after some days waxed so heavy upon him that, being unable to brook it, he departed this life. The third day after his death, for that belike he had not before been able, he came by night, according to the promise made, into Muccio's chamber, and called the latter, who slept fast. Muccio awoke and said, Who art thou? Whereto he answered, I am Tingaccio, who, according to the promise which I made thee, am come back to thee to give thee news of the other world. Muccio was somewhat affrighted at seeing him. Nevertheless, taking heart, Thou art welcome, brother mine, quoth he, and presently asked him if he were lost. Things are lost that are not to be found, replied Tingaccio, and how should I be here if I were lost? Alack, cried Muccio, I say not so. Nay, I ask thee if thou art among the damned souls in the avenging fire of hell. Whereto quoth Tingaccio, As for that, no, but I am, notwithstanding, in very grievous and anguishful torment for the sins committed by me. Muccio then particularly inquired of him what punishments were awarded in the other world for each of the sins that folk used to commit here below, and he told him them all. After this Muccio asked if there were aught he might do for him in this world, whereto Tingaccio replied that there was, to wit, that he should let say for him masses and orisons and do alms in his name, for that these things were mightily profitable to those who abode yonder. Muccio said that he would well, and Tingaccio offering to take leave of him, he remembered himself of the latter's amour with his gossip, and raising his head, said, Now that I bethink me, Tingaccio, what punishment is given thee over yonder anent thy gossip, with whom thou layest, when as thou wast here below? Brother mine, answered Tingacho, when as I came yonder, there was one who it seemed knew all my sins by heart and bade me betake myself to a certain place, where I bemoaned my offences in exceeding sore punishment, and where I found many companions condemned to the same penance as myself. Being among them and remembering me of that which I had done whilera with my gossip, I looked for a much sorer punishment on account thereof than that which had presently been given me, and went all shivering for fear. Albeit I was in a great fire and an exceeding hot, which one who was by my side perceiving, he said to me, What aileth thee more than all the others who are here that thou shiverest, being in the fire? Mary, said I, my friend, I am sore in fear of the sentence I expect for a grievous sin I wrought aforetime. The other asked me what sin this was, and I answered, it was that I lay with a gossip of mine, and that with such a vengeance that it cost me my life. Whereupon quoth he, making merry over my fear, Go to, fool, have no fear. Here is no manner of account taken of gossips. Which when I heard, I was altogether reassured. This said, and the day drawing near, Muccio, quoth he, abide with God, for I may no longer be with thee, and was suddenly gone. Muccio, hearing that no account was taken of gossips in the world to come, began to make mock of his own simplicity, for that whiles he had spared several of them, wherefore, laying by his ignorance, he became wiser in that respect for the future. Which things if Fer Rinaldo had known, he had not needed to go asylogizing, whenas he converted his good gossip to his pleasure. Zephyr was now arisen, for the sun that drew near unto the setting, when the king, having made an end of his story and there being none other left to tell, put off the crown from his own head and set it on that of Loretta, saying, Madam, with yourself I crown you queen of our company. Do you then, from this time forth, as sovereign lady, command that which you may deem shall be for the pleasure and solacement of all. This said, he reseated himself, whereupon Loretta, become queen, let call the seneschal and bade him look that the tables be set in the pleasant valley somewhat earlier than of wont, so they might return to the palace at their leisure. After which she instructed him what he should do what while her sovereignty lasted. Then, turning to the company, she said, Dioneo willed yesterday that we should discourse today of the tricks that women play their husbands, and but that I am loath to show myself of the tribe of snappish curs, which are fain incontinent to avenge themselves of any affront done them. I would say that tomorrow's discourse should be of the tricks that men play their wives. But letting that be, I ordain that each bethink himself to tell of the tricks that all day long women play men, or men women, or men one another, and I doubt not but that in this there will be no less of pleasant discourse than there hath been today. So saying, she rose to her feet and dismissed the company till supper time. Accordingly, they all, ladies and men alike, arose, and some began to go barefoot through the clear water, whilst others went a-pleasuring upon the greensward among the straight and goodly trees. Dioneo and Fiametta sang together a great while of Arcite and Palamon, and on this wise, taking various and divers delights, they passed the time with the utmost satisfaction until the hour of supper, which being come, they seated themselves at table beside the lakelet, and there, to the song of 1,000 birds, still refreshed by a gentle breeze, that came from the little hills around, and untroubled of any fly, they supped in peace and cheer. Then, the tables being removed and the sun being yet half vespers high, after they had gone a while round about the pleasant valley, they wended their way again, even as it pleased their queen, with slow steps towards their wonted dwelling-place, and jesting and chattering 1,000 things, as well of those whereof it had been that day discoursed as of others. They came near upon nightfall to the fair palace, where having with the coolest of wines and confections done away the fatigues of the little journey, they presently fell to dancing about the fair fountain, caroling now to the sound of Tindaro's bagpipe and anon to that of other instruments. But after a while, the queen bade Philomena sing a song, whereupon she began thus. Alack, my life forlorn! Wilt ever chance I may once more regain Th estate whence sorry fortune hath me torn? Certes, I know not such a wish of fire I carry in my thought, to find me where, alas, I was whilera. Oh, dear my treasure, thou my sole desire, that hold'st my heart distraught. Tell it me, thou, for whom I know nor dare to ask it otherwhere. Ah, dear my lord, oh, cause me hope again, so I may comfort me my sprite wayworn. What was the charm I cannot rightly tell, that kindled in me such a flame of love that rest nor day nor night? I find, for, by some strong unwonted spell, hearing and touch, and seeing each new fires in me did light, wherein I burn outright. Nor other than thyself can soothe my pain, nor call my senses back, by love o'erborne. Oh, tell me if and when, then it shall be, that I shall find thee ere, whereas I kiss those eyes that did me slay. Oh, dear my good, my soul, ah, tell it me, when thou wilt come back there, and saying quickly, comfort my dismay. Some deal short be the stay, until thou come, and long mayst thou remain. I'm so love-struck, I reck not of men's scorn. If once again I chance to hold thee I will not be so fond, as erst I was to suffer thee to fly. Nay, fast I'll hold thee, hap of it what may, and having thee in bond, of thy sweet mouth my lust I'll satisfy. Now of naught else will I discourse. Quick, to thy bosom come me strain. The sheer thought bids me sing like lark at morn. This song caused all the company conclude that a new and pleasing love held Philomela in bonds, and as by the words it appeared that she had tasted more thereof than sight alone, she was envied of this by certain who were there, and who held her therefore so much the happier. But after her song was ended, the queen, remembering her that the ensuing day was Friday, thus graciously bespoke all, noble ladies, and you also, young men, that tomorrow is the day consecrated to the passion of our Lord, the which, and you remember aright, what time Neophile was queen we celebrated devoutly, and therein gave pause to our delightsome discoursements, and on like wise we did with the following Saturday. Wherefore, being minded to follow the good example given us by Neophile, I hold it seemly that tomorrow and the next day we abstain, even as we did a week agone, from our pleasant story-telling, recalling to memory that which on those days befell Wylera for the salvation of our souls. The queen's pious speech was pleasing unto all, and a good part of the night being now past, they all, dismissed by her, betook them to repose. Here endeth the 7th day of the Decameron. If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe to the channel by hitting the subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon to receive new content notifications.